I call this meeting to order. We are meeting, as you know, in a webcast session. Bienvenue à la réunion.
Welcome to the 13th meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research.
Internal economy requires that committees adhere to the following health protocols, which are in effect until June 23rd, 2022. We'd like to welcome all our witnesses, and we'd like to welcome new members tonight. It's wonderful. All individuals wishing to enter the parliamentary precinct must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. All those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask, except for members who are at their place during proceedings. Please contact our excellent clerk for further information on preventative measures for health and safety. As chair, I will enforce these measures, and as always, I thank you all for your cooperation. La réunion d'aujourd'hui se déroule dans...
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021.
Line a few rules to follow. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you may choose to hear floor, audio, or in English or French. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak. Un rappel que vous devriez adresser la présidence dans toute...
A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair.
Your microphone should be muted, and the committee clerk and I will maintain a speaking list for all members. Welcome to our witnesses. This is our last meeting on top talent, research, and innovation. Tonight, appearing as an individual, we have Dr. Joel Blitt, Associate Professor, University of Waterloo, Dr. Ghislaine Lamontagne, Associate Professor, DePaul University. From Université de Sherbrooke, we have Dr. Jean-Pierre Perrault, Vice President, Research and Graduate Studies. And from Wilfrid Laurier University, we have Deborah McClatchy, President and Vice Chancellor. We welcome you all. We are thrilled you are joining us. Each group or person will have 5 minutes. At the 4.5-minute mark, I will hold up this card. You will know you have 30 seconds left. We aim to be fair. And with that, we will begin with Dr. Blitt. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and committee, for the invitation to speak to you today. So I'm a professor of economics. I've been studying talent and innovation for almost 2 decades, and I speak to you as an individual and as a Canadian that deeply cares about our country. So if you'll allow me, I want to mostly focus on the big picture. I hope my remarks can help provide some context to the discussions around science, talent, and publicly funded research. So let me start with the bad news. It's no secret that Canada has a large and growing innovation and productivity gap, though the extent of it might be surprising. 50 years ago, we had the second highest labor productivity among the G7. Today, we have the second lowest, ahead only of Japan. OECD data also shows that we are now last among G7 countries, tied with Italy, for the fewest triadic patents as a share of GDP. Other measures of innovation tell a similar story, whether it's high-tech exports, advanced manufacturing, or tech startups. I'm concerned because it's only a matter of time before these deficits are reflected in the wages and standard of living of Canadians. The question is, why is our performance so poor? Well, it's particularly puzzling because if we consider that Canada has many of the building blocks necessary to be a successful innovator. The most crucial of these building blocks are precisely the things that this committee is tasked with studying. So basic science, an educated workforce, public R&D. Much of the testimony that this committee has been hearing is that Canada needs to invest more in these things. I don't disagree. These are Canada's strengths, and we need to continue to foster them. But it's important to understand that simply doubling down on our strengths is not going to address our innovation gap. This gap exists because we're failing to translate basic research into we're failing to translate basic research and invention into valuable innovations. An illustrative example of this is artificial intelligence. Canadian researchers, people like Jeff Hinton, developed many of the key breakthroughs in machine learning, but the commercial benefits were largely captured by foreign entities. I teach my students to think of the innovative process as a pipeline. To get good outputs, things like new products, patents, high-tech exports, advanced manufacturing, and tech startups, we need quality inputs, excellence in basic science, public R&D, and educated workforce, and hence the importance of this committee. But to get good outputs, we must also fix the pipeline itself, because frankly, it's broken. Canada's private sector is simply not capitalizing on our strengths in basic science, invention, and talent. One indication of this is Canada's low levels of business R&D as a percentage of GDP, where we're last among the G7. We're also the only G7 country that has seen a decline in business R&D intensity since the start of the millennium. It seems that we invent and others commercialize our discoveries. I want to emphasize that there's no single magic bullet to address this challenge. Our colleges and universities must put an increased focus on entrepreneurship and commercialization, and our government on firm growth. But fundamentally, tackling this challenge is going to require a holistic rethink of our innovation policy. We must continue to invest in and improve the things that we are doing well, science, public R&D, education, and I'm heartened by the work of this committee. But we must also invest in and reform things like intellectual property, R&D tax credits, skilled immigration, venture capital, competition policy, and others. If the goal is to build a more prosperous Canadian economy, then investments in basic science and education must be coupled with broader innovation policy reforms. Now, that's the main context of what I wanted to share today. But since talent is one of the key topics of interest, allow me to also share 3 very quick points on that front, which are based on some of my own research. So number 1, strong STEM education is key. Some of our research suggests that, not surprisingly, STEM-educated graduates tend to disproportionately contribute to technological innovation. The more STEM graduates, the better. Number 2, the brain drain is real. According to data from the World Intellectual Property Office, Canada is the 3rd biggest net loser of inventors due to migration, behind only China and India. And there's a scale thing there too. And number 3, skilled immigration is no panacea. Our research suggests that our STEM-educated immigrants are not having the same impact on innovation as similar immigrants in the US, in part because they're not finding employment in STEM. We did, however, find some evidence that our international student immigrants are doing better, and we're launching a study to examine this further. So thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd be happy to take any questions and expand on any of these points. Thank you.
Dr. Blitt, thank you for your testimony. We're grateful. Now we will go on to Dr. Lamontagne for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the invitation to appear as a witness in front of this committee on an important topic. I'm joining you from Liverpool in the UK as I'm here working for the week, but I've lived in Chicago in the United States since 2011. Today, I want to tell you about my background, the trajectory of my career that led me to be working outside of Canada, and some challenges that I see Canada facing in retaining and recruiting talent. While I've lived outside of Canada for over a decade, I am a proud Canadian. I attended the University of Calgary, where I completed my Bachelor of Science degree in ecology and my Master of Science degree in conservation ecology. And I was the first in my family to earn any university degree. Having a passion for science and research, I continued my education and completed my PhD in environmental biology and ecology at the University of Alberta, finishing in 2007. As a PhD student, I held an NSERC graduate scholarship and a Killam graduate scholarship. I completed a postdoctoral fellowship that was funded by the Alberta Ingenuity Fund. And I point out these awards not to boast, but as an indication of the investments made to support my education and training, for which I am grateful. As an aside, I do want to point out that the postdoctoral fellowship that I held from 2007 to 2009 had an annual salary of $48,000 a year, and this is more than what an NSERC postdoctoral fellowship is worth currently, 15 years later. In the second year of my postdoctoral position, I looked to enter the job market with the intention of applying for positions as a professor. There were few jobs available in Canada in my field, and that year I applied for only 2 or 3 jobs. I was not successful in obtaining one of those positions, and I took an international job for 1 year. I then returned to Canada and again entered the job market. The second time in 2010, there were no job postings at Canadian universities for positions aligned with my field of research. In terms of my field of research, I'm a population ecologist, and I study a wide variety of plant and animal species. I'm interested in the patterns and drivers and fluctuations in biological populations over time and space. A large component of my research program is on the reproductive patterns of conifer tree species in the boreal forest. Their seeds are critical for forest regeneration, and the patterns of seed production drive the dynamics of a suite of seed-consuming species and their predators. My research occurs across scales from local to continental and global scales and has implications for understanding the consequences of global change. So back to my situation in the job market. Since the late 1990s, I had heard talk that there would be academic positions opening up soon at Canadian universities due to retirements. However, I found that those positions were not materializing. Every job I applied for in 2010 to 2011 was in the United States, and I got a tenure-track job in the United States. I did not set out to leave Canada, but I did not have options in Canada to move forward with my career. Leaving Canada to go work in a different country brought along challenges, but also opportunities. Moving to a system in a new country where I knew little about the National Science Foundation funding structure was a challenge. Funding rates were low and the application procedure was very different than NSERC. However, I've become quite successful in obtaining federal funding in the United States, and over the past 5 years, research grants that I have had a leadership role on have been funded to the total amount of approximately $1.6 million Canadian. The investments that the National Science Foundation makes in research grants, training grants, support for long-term data collection, as well as synthesis work, provide a meaningful and broad variety of support for science and research, for which I and my research have benefited. I maintain connections to Canada, both personally and professionally, and I hold a lifetime membership in the Canadian Society for Ecology and Evolution. I care about science and research in Canada, and I want my colleagues, particularly those who are early career, to be able to stay and be successful and not have to leave. The number of PhDs graduating from Canadian universities has increased over time, while the availability of tenure-track faculty positions has gone down, despite retirements. There's also a trend that contract teaching faculty who do not do scientific research are replacing many tenure-track positions. Short-term contract faculty are cheaper to employ than tenure-track faculty, and this could be a strategy to deal with reductions in government funding for universities. Increasing government support of universities to ensure that they have the ability to replace and increase tenure-track faculty positions is critical to retain scientists in Canada. I also suggest that increasing federal investments in research, including broad-scale long-term research infrastructure that parallels that in other countries around the world, would be wise to support research and discovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lamontagne, and we thank you for being with us despite being in the UK tonight, and it's a late hour for you, so thank you so very much. And now we will go to the Université de Sherbrooke to Dr. Perrault for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Première.
First of all, thank you, Madam Chair, for the invitation. I could have, of course, used many of my different titles tonight to be with you, to talk to you. But of course, I need to mention that I've been part of the process of bringing Moderna to Canada. But from the University of Sherbrooke, of course, I'm involved in different fields and in science promotion activities, research and innovation promotion activities, and science culture promotion in the French-speaking circles. But I especially want to concentrate on graduate studies, bursaries, and grants. Of course, Canada has a lot of richnesses, and we have to invest in science and focus on economic and social advantages. And we have to invest in all sciences. Investment guarantees our future, and I am preaching to the choir here, I know, so I won't go into too much detail. But having said that, it's of key importance to invest in research and development, and students are the first link in that chain, and they undertake research activities in different laboratories and research teams all across the country. And they are key to overcome the great challenges facing our country. About 20% will go on to become researchers, but about 80% remaining will go elsewhere, will go into our companies, our collectivities, departments, and different government institutions. But it's also important to underline that all will find employment, and therefore their unemployment rate will be very, very low. So these people will continue to work and contribute to our society. So how do we attract them into these fields? In 2003, we had 17,500 for graduate studies offered as a bursary, and these went help students with their fees, different fees associated with their schooling, with their studies, and their other needs. It's also very important that there are three granting councils that are offering these bursaries and grants, and all institutions are aligned on this. In 2003, the poverty threshold was $16,000, so what was offered was slightly above that. Of course, the cost of housing, cost of groceries have gone up significantly with spiraling inflation that we have been experiencing over the past couple of months. And student bursaries are offered to the best of the best in our system. And currently, to these people to live under the poverty threshold. So would they be really encouraged by this? I have my doubts. But I'm convinced that the salaries of our elected officials have increased, indexed to inflation and the index to the increases in the cost of living. But since 2003, we haven't seen any improvement in bursaries and grants offered to students. When we look at the 2003 to 2022 rate change, the change in inflation between these years, 2003 to 2022, we're looking at 44.9%. So the bursaries offered should have gone up significantly, but they have not done that. We have made different proposals in this field, for instance, to increase the bursaries offered for PhD students to $35,000. So this should be considered as the pipeline for future talents in our country. And of course, students are finding themselves in a position where they have to find a job, get a job to make ends meet, and they're not able to really concentrate on their higher education. And this puts in risk, of course, the procedure of development of science and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perot. We're really grateful you've joined us tonight. And now we will go to the President and Vice Chancellor of Wilfrid Laurier University, to Dr. Deborah McClatchy. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chairs, and honorable members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm speaking from the Haldeman Tract, traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. This land is part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. And today, this gathering place is home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, in which they make many contributions to knowledge and innovation that have made and continue to make this nation we call Canada. Wilfrid Laurier University is a comprehensive mid-sized university in southwestern Ontario with campuses in Waterloo Region and Brantford. We are opening a campus in Milton in 2024 on the west side of the Greater Toronto Area, which will have a science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics focus, and which will further grow our research capacity in environmental health. In addition to being Laurier's president, I'm also a scientist with an active research lab where I supervise undergraduate and graduate student work in the field of ecotoxicology. I'm sharing my observations and recommendations from the perspective of both an administrator and researcher mentor. Recently, Laurier alumnus and CEO of Ipsos Public Affairs, Dr. Dale Bricker, spoke to our senior leadership team about demographic trends in Canada. Canada is in for a demographic shock in the next 20 years. Our population is aging, and the proportion of working-age Canadians is declining. By the mid-2030s, only 58% of our population will be of working age. At the same time, there is a global competition for research talent. We cannot hope to be competitive in research and innovation if we do not have people from Canada and from around the world who share a passion for discovery coming to our universities to pursue advanced level degrees and research. I'm going to focus on student pathways in my remarks while recognizing that programs such as the Canada Research Chairs and the Canada Excellence Research Chairs are critical to the country for retention of top talent. Canada is recognized around the world for its quality of life. Geopolitical conflicts and the global rise of governments unfriendly to academia have made Canada an increasingly attractive place for those pursuing opportunities in research and innovation. We must leverage this desire to come to Canada by making it more accessible to international students. We can do this by streamlining study and work permits, supporting immigration and citizenship processes, and increasing funding for developing research talent. We also have an opportunity to be best in class in expanding our research talent pathways for Canadian youth. Canada has fallen behind our competition across the global market when it comes to graduate and postdoctoral supports. Federal scholarships have not kept pace with inflation. The investments in targeted scholarships and fellowships for Black student researchers was welcome news in the federal budget, and we need further investment in Canada's scholarship programs, including those that will widen the pathway in areas of science and technology to persons with disabilities and women identified, Indigenous, 2S LGBTQIA+, and racialized persons. We need to give Canada's youth the mentorship, resources, and supports they need to pursue big, bold ideas that drive innovation and discovery. If we are serious about equity, diversity, and inclusion, we need to shed the assumption that graduate students and postdoctoral fellows should be self-funding or augmenting their studies through work, family support, and student loans. It is disheartening to see promising students leave the university and research environments because of a lack of financial support, including first-generation students and those without access to generational wealth. Building subject matter knowledge and research acumen takes a significant amount of effort. When we lose these people, it wastes the human and financial resources invested. At Laurier, we are taking steps to address these barriers. We are one of the 17 institutions in Canada that are part of the Federal Dimensions pilot project to collect data and analyze our systems and practices. We are taking steps to increase opportunities for careers and research, including developing mentoring programs specific to Indigenous youth. However, to attract and retain the students who will drive the next period of discovery, there's a need for financial support that keeps them in the system. In short, when there is a growing global shortage of scientific talent tied to demographic shifts in Canada and a changing global context, Canada needs to be an inclusive and welcoming and financially supportive environment to ensure research is an attractive and viable career option for trainees. Thank you.
Thank you, President McClatchy, and I'd like to thank all of you. We're grateful for your time, your experience, and your expertise, and we have really committed and dedicated committee members who are eager to ask you questions. So we're going to begin our first round of questioning. It's for 6 minutes. And tonight we begin with Mr. Soroka. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for participating tonight. My first question is going to go to Dr. Blitt. In your research, can skilled immigration raise innovation, evidence from Canadian cities? You highlighted in an abstract that science, engineering, technology, or mathematics, STEM, educated immigrants are employed in STEM jobs, but this impact is limited because only a third of this population are employed in STEM jobs. Can you please expand on this finding and why this seems to be the case in accordance with your research?
Well, thank you for the question. So yeah, we're we found that contrary to the US, our STEM educated immigrants were not having as large an impact on innovation in the places where they were moving to. And so we tried to dig a little bit deeper to find out why. And the biggest piece of evidence that we found is that, as you point out, only about a third of our STEM educated immigrants are actually working in STEM. And this is compared to, I think it's about half in the US. Now, you asked why. I don't have a good answer for why, because that was sort of the extent of our study, and I think there needs to be a follow-up study of that. But it's consistent with the story, that the cliche that our engineers are driving taxis in Toronto, right? So immigrant engineers driving taxis. Unfortunately, I can't tell you why. Not yet.
Okay, well, if you do find that out while we're still doing our study, we'd appreciate any more information on that as well. Also, Dr. Blitt, based on your research, you talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of the Canadian points system. And with foreign credentials may be obtained from the education system that are different from Canadian education system, how can we ensure balancing the integration of foreign talent into Canada while still upholding Canadian integrity and standards for research and innovation?
Yeah, so I think you raise a good point. It's a challenge. On the one hand, we want to integrate and incorporate our immigrants as quickly as possible. On the other hand, in certain cases, I'm sure there are questions around the quality of their education, depending where they come from. One thing that we mentioned a little bit in the paper is that the immigrants that are being educated in Canada, so the international student immigrants, seem to be doing quite well and seem to be having a bigger positive impact on the economy. And so one thing that comes out of our paper is that we might want to increase that channel of immigration. And by the way, we actually are launching into a new study on that right now.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Also, Dr. Blitt, you published another one on automation and reallocation, and where you've stated that automation will make Canadians richer and jobs more meaningful by removing menial tasks. It is a change that will come, and our choices are twofold: how quickly to adopt it and what governance to put in place so that all Canadians benefit. We have had witnesses highlighted the shortage of jobs for researchers and postdoctorate graduates. How do you propose we can integrate automation through artificial intelligence and robotics while still providing opportunities for these researchers?
I think AI, robotics, they're not going to be replacing these researchers. They're going to be replacing, actually, this is still an open question, I should mention, but they're probably going to be replacing people in the middle and the lower end of the skill distribution, so not the researchers. As a matter of fact, it may well be that we will require even more researchers to advance the AI and robotics, especially as they become more prevalent, more useful in our economy. Having said all, so these things are important to do because this is how Canada is going to continue to improve productivity, is going to continue to improve wages for Canadians, standard of living, but it is going to have distributive impacts. So some Canadians are going to benefit, others are going to lose out. And so it's also important to make sure that we have a generous social safety net and we consider the distributional impacts.
Okay, as well, Dr. Blitt, how do you think the pandemic has negatively affected the attraction of international top talent in Canada or for research and innovation? Has this since been improved following the slow recession from pandemic mandates?
So I don't know if I'm the best place to answer that question. I think the obvious answer is that when the movement of people around the world was restricted due to COVID, it became more difficult to bring in foreign talent. But right now, I suspect some of the other panelists would be in a better position to answer that question.
Okay, well, one more question then, Dr. Blitt. When you start looking at all your research that you've done since 2020, how much do you think the situation has changed, or has it changed really in the last 2 years?
I think COVID-19, the crisis presents Canada with a tremendous opportunity. We are lagging, as I pointed out at the beginning of my testimony, in innovation and productivity. Some of my research has shown that during crises is a time when there's rapid change and where if you if you embrace change, if you embrace automation and reallocation, you can really improve your economy really quickly. And so this is potentially a historic opportunity for us to do so. We just need to grab it. And I'm not sure to what extent we are grabbing it right now.
I think I'm out of time, aren't I? Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the witnesses. Then.
But thank you. As I said, committee, you have witnesses. We're so grateful for your time, and you really do have an interested committee here. We're now going to go to Mr. McKinnon for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely sure who to direct this question to, but all my life I've heard of the brain drain, losing talent, using skills, particularly to the United States, but obviously elsewhere in the world as well. So I'm wondering if, and we're hearing it again, of course, tonight and throughout our study. So I guess my question is, has it ever been better? Is this a new problem, or is it a problem that has worsened in recent years? Is there a time in our, I guess, last 50 years or so that, or if you have any information, that we were doing it better? And if so, what can we do to reproduce that or improve on that? And I'll start with Dr. McClackie, please.
Thank you very much for that question. I mean, I don't have the numbers with these, so maybe Dr. Blitt has a better lens on that. But I think that there have been periods of time when the federal government, for example, has put extensive resources into the system. So, for example, through the early years of the Canada Research Chairs, through and other funding mechanisms where that's been an opportunity for the universities to expand and recruit talent, not just to retain within Canada, but also to repatriate excellent researchers like Dr. Lamontagne and others into the system. And I think that over time that the impact still an exceptionally amazing programs, but that their percentage of researchers that they're supporting has lessened over time, and therefore doesn't have the same impact that it would have had 20 years ago when those programs were first initiated.
Thank you. I'll extend that same question to Dr. Blitt, if you would mind.
Yeah, so my apologies, I don't know the numbers, so I can't give you hard data on this. My sense is that at least when it comes to academia, I think what Dr. Lamontagne was mentioning earlier, there's more and more positions that are lecturer positions instead of tenure track positions doing research. And so obviously there are fewer research tenure track positions, and so more of our graduates for PhDs are going abroad or having to find work in outside their preferred field or outside their preferred area. If we want to talk more generally about the brain drain, so not just researchers and professors, but more generally, again, I don't have the data, but to me, this data I quoted from WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Office, so they look at inventors around the world, so people that have invented patents, and they look at what countries they're from and where they're living. And Canada had the biggest number of Canadians living abroad that had patented, only second to China and India. And given that China and India, have 1 billion people plus, it is quite shocking, right? Imagine how many people we're actually losing that could be contributing to innovation.
Let's build on that. You certainly mentioned that we're losing a lot of our inventors, and much research that is done in Canada is not capitalized here. It's not. The benefit goes somewhere else. So what can we do as a government? What kind of policies can we bring forward that will change that picture, so that we can encourage more private industry to take up some of these opportunities and advance them within our own country and for our own economy?
So that's that's $1 million question. I think it's complicated, but let me at least share a few ideas. I think the biggest challenge is sort of at the interface of research and invention in universities and other places and industry. It's that interface between the two. There just isn't enough communication between those two parties. And so a lot of this research either sits in someone's drawer or it gets picked up by maybe foreign firms or something of the sort. One of the things that I've been seeing that I'm quite encouraged by is this idea that instead of creating a Canadian like an ARPA or a CARPA, trying to create some kind of a system similar to what they have in Israel or similar to what they have in Finland. I know that we've been talking about this, and basically it does a few things. One is it convenes players, and so university researchers, industry, around big topics, around big ideas, around big problems. So this is something that the government can play an important role in doing and brings people together. Another thing it can do is related to this, it can connect people, right? So it can connect, if there's a firm or a business that needs expertise in AI or something like that, they often don't know where to get it. They could connect that firm with university researchers in those areas. And lastly, support for R&D. So, I mentioned in my testimony that our firms are doing almost no R&D, very little, last in the G7 and going down. And so, we can reform the shred system, but we can also do some direct support of R&D. I'm encouraged by the latest things that I'm hearing. I think we need to move more in this direction. And if I can give a final plug to the University of Waterloo, I think the University of Waterloo is doing some very excellent things in terms of entrepreneurship and commercialization. And we're actually right now just trying to ramp that up by creating an office that's going to be devoted specifically to that.
Well, thank you, Doctor, and thank you to everyone. And I do have other questions, but I'm out of time. So, Dr. Lamontagne, I think they'll have to wait. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Maintenant, je vous passe.
Now I would like to hand it over to Mr. Blanchette, Jean-Carl. We're very happy to have you here with us. Glad that you were able to make it. Welcome. Madam Chair, I would like to salute you, our colleagues, the witnesses. We had a bit of a technical issue, but it's taken care of. So my first question will be to Mr. Perrault. Mr. Perrault, I would like to go ahead and congratulate you, first of all, for the excellent work you have carried out. Last week, there was a significant congress in Quebec. And of course, there was a lot of work that was undertaken in that Congress, 3,500 scientific publications, all in French. So congratulations for all the work that you're doing for science in French and in all of French-speaking parts of the world. So I would like to touch upon attracting top talent in our higher education institutions. Mr. Perrault, you mentioned a difficulty that many other people touched upon, the bursaries offered by the Government of Canada that have not gone up since 2003. You mentioned inflation, which is also, of course, very striking. And I would like to give you some time to maybe elaborate on that, on the effects of this reality in our universities. How does this impact the attraction and retention of top talents in higher education? Well, the response to that is relatively simple. We are actually doing a disservice to the upcoming generation from a financial point of view. We are not doing much to support students. Fewer Canadians are deciding to go into the second and third cycle higher education or studies. So all universities across the country are having to take on board international students who come here and then who leave to go to other countries. So as Canadians, we are, of course, contributing to furthering science and innovation globally, if I can put it this way. So we have to make sure that it should be attractive to go into higher education. And then, of course, all of these people, as I was saying in my opening remarks, will, of course, greatly contribute to the Canadian economy by filling very important gaps in our system. For instance, in master's degrees, the more you have students going to university, and the fewer gaps of unemployment people will have. So this will, of course, have a significant impact on our economy. So there is this pipeline idea to begin with. Another challenge is that fewer and fewer or rather more and more students are having to find a job to make ends meet. So they are not spending enough time on their studies, or not as much as they would like anyway. So we are seeing the impacts of this everywhere in the country. Higher level studies are being extended over time, if you will. So we have to encourage them to get their studies done as quickly as possible by allowing them, as was the case at one point in time, that by allowing them to be able to afford this. Thank you, Mr. Perrault. There is a recommendation to increase bursaries to $25,000 for master's studies and $35,000 for PhDs. There's an Australian model that indexes this to the inflation rate. What do you think about that? Of course, increasing it is one thing, but it has to be annually indexed to inflation. Since 2003, had we indexed these bursaries, it would already be at $25,000 today, because of course we all buy groceries and the prices are going up. We know the challenges of that, so we have to make up that delay, if you will. The bursaries and grants have to go up in value in all sectors, because there's not a discipline that's less important than others. So we have to make that increase and then index it to inflation. Thank you. You Mensch highlighted an interesting point. You said that students arriving at the end of their undergraduate studies, they are being offered this option to live under the poverty threshold to go into higher studies, but on the other hand, they might be attracted towards very interesting employment opportunities. Yes, I'll elaborate on that. The labor market is so bubbling, so dynamic at this point in time that it is becoming harder and harder to keep students until the end of their undergraduate studies, especially those studying in fields related to IT, because they're all of a sudden offered positions at $90,000 a year or more. So it is as if we're saying, dear student, do you want to work a 40-hour week and get $90,000 per year, or continue with your studies where the future is not as certain and maybe you will live under the poverty threshold under the current circumstances prevailing in the country? So that is the situation we're facing. Thank you, Mr. Perrault. Do you think there is something else, other things that we can do to keep and attract talent in our education institutions? What can the government do to create the necessary conditions? There are three elements to it. The bursary program is very important, and these are the best means we have in our country, and this elevates the standards for all of our institutions. Second is that the pathways should be a lot more efficient to take students through the system and make them graduate as quickly as possible, so that they can maybe go on to become entrepreneurs or do something else with their lives, of course. But university has to be a means of contributing to innovation. Dr. Perrault, I'm sorry.
Dear Jean-Cat, I'm sorry. The worst part of this job. I'm delighted, though, tonight we have, we're delighted, Mr. Bachrach, that you can join us tonight, and we thank you for joining us. For 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and I'm delighted to be here on behalf of my wonderful colleague, Mr. Cannings, who's an actual scientist and would probably be much better suited to this discussion than I. But I'm going to do my very best, and it is an interesting conversation. I've appreciated all of the insights that our witnesses have shared with us so far. I think I'd like to start with Dr. Montaigne and pick up on some of these questions around support for graduate students. It was brought to my attention, this article in the Globe and Mail from May 12th regarding scholarship amounts in Canada for science graduates. And I'll just read the first sentence. Some of the witnesses are probably familiar with the article. It says federal scholarships intended to support some of Canada's most accomplished graduate students in science have become so devalued by inflation that those who receive them are effectively earning below the poverty line, absent any additional means of income, a coalition of senior researchers has warned. And, obviously they're looking to the government to increase these scholarships. Dr. Lamontagne, as someone who's worked in both Canadian and American universities, could you talk a little bit about how the value of these scholarships, the low value, and the fact that they haven't gone up in 19 years, how that impacts graduate students and how it might differ between Canada and the United States?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the question. And I will start with a little bit of my experience. When I started my PhD back in 2001, I got a mortgage. So in Edmonton, based on what my salary was as a graduate student, I don't think that's happening anymore. So I'll say that to start. Yeah, so the difference between Canada and the US, there are different opportunities for researchers to be able to fund graduate students. So for instance, in the United States, when I apply for a grant, I can put a graduate student on that grant, and that would pay them a salary and could pay their tuition. And I don't think that those same opportunities exist in Canada. And that's a function of the difference in the granting system. And the opportunity for individual researchers to have many different grants to fund many different projects at the same time in the US system. I don't want to say that everything is better in the US with the money that graduate students are getting. Some universities, their students are getting quite a lot. There are still issues with students being at about the poverty line as well. So I don't want to. Yeah.
What percentage of graduate students would you say are able to live on the scholarship or grant money that they secure versus having to work a second or third job? I think Mr. Perot touched on this and talked a little bit about how working additional jobs actually takes away from their ability to focus on the reason that they're there at the university. If you're waiting tables in the evening or, having to travel to a work site so that you can earn enough money to put food on the table. How many students would you say are in that position, relatively speaking?
Sure. Yeah, I won't have specific numbers on that. But yeah, it's definitely an issue. So there are some schools and some systems where graduate students may get paid during the academic year, but then they don't get paid during the summer, and that's going to influence their ability to do research. And when you're making below the poverty line, you have to have another job in order to put food on the table and do everything that you need to do. So yeah, I think I don't have numbers, maybe someone else would.
I wonder if Dr. McClatchy might have a sense of that as the president of Laurier University. Do you have a sense of what proportion of graduate students are working additional jobs in order to make ends meet?
I would venture almost all of them. And some of them are doing work that's very complementary to their studies. For example, they're being teaching assistants in undergraduate labs, so they're enhancing their professional skill development and teaching skills, and so those are great opportunities. But more and more students, even ones on the best federal scholarships, are also taking part-time jobs as servers and in restaurants and other types of positions because of the cost. I think the other critical thing to consider here is that not only are the students living below the poverty line, they're also paying tuition to the institution, which can be depending on the institution, is going to be $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 plus dollars that you have to take off the top of those scholarships, and then what is left is what they have to pay rent and food. And one thing that most Canadian universities don't do a lot of tuition remissions for graduate students. So I think that's also a really important concern. very often I have students ask me if they can take on an additional TA-ships or something like that. And as their supervisor, I don't want to, even though I know it's going to take away from their research activities, I also understand that, they need to pay their bills. And as students get older and become postdocs, there's also a greater chance that they're also thinking about starting families and doing other things that really have to be taken into consideration as well.
Dr. McClatchy, I'm sorry to interrupt. And Mr. Bachrach, once again, we're delighted you could join us. We're now going to go to the second round of questions. And this one's for 5 minutes. And we begin with Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to our witnesses. Our chair knows too well that we have so many great questions. We only have a little bit of time, and but I'm happy for my colleagues who've asked some great questions. Dr. Blitz, I'm going to start with you. Fantastic discussion. I think you have some great examples. You say we can keep students from STEM, but we're losing STEM students. So I'm going to talk about retention. I know there's no silver bullet for fixing these innovation problems, as you've mentioned. So what is step one to keep students, specifically in STEM, as you mentioned, in Canada?
So to keep STEM educated students from leaving Canada, is that the question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, so I think obviously one key is to have good paying jobs in Canada in the STEM sector, right? And I think that the government can only control that so much. I think one change that has come with COVID-19 is that we've all learned to work remotely. And I think a lot of firms have now decided that you can have research teams that, have people all over the world. And so what that means is that potentially a lot of our students that maybe were moving to Silicon Valley or Boston or anywhere else may actually end up staying in Canada and working remotely for these multinationals. Now, of course, that's kind of like a two-edged sword, because the other, if you think about our small firms that are trying to hire STEM educated graduates, well, they're now competing with all these multinationals that are setting up these sort of remote. So I think there has been a paradigm shift because of this shift to remote work. The other thing that has happened is, I have friends that are CEOs of tech firms, and they are starting to hire. They've realized that. So their employees asked if they could start working remotely, and they were all Canadian, and they said yes. And within 6 months, they realized, well, why am I paying these guys, 3 times what I'd be paying someone in India or Brazil or Russia or wherever you want? And so they're actually starting to hire from abroad now because they're all working remotely. So I think there has been a very strong paradigm shift here. I'll just add one last thing. If we can keep students, so graduates in STEM, for say 3 or 4 years after they graduate in Canada, then I think they will probably stay long term, because by that time they've probably settled down, maybe they're starting to have kids. And so really it's a matter of like, how can we keep them around for 3 or 4 years? And I think we could get creative, right? I mean, right now tuition's very high. What if, anyone that stays for 4 years gets a complete refund or a half refund for their tuition? So, just crazy ideas.
And I loved your idea about creating big ideas. Are you familiar with the U.S. Department of Energy's Earthshot program? So where they're looking at big ideas, they're putting a lot of money behind solving those with specific targets that they want to hit. So for all of the U.S. energy, it's going to be geothermal, and it's going to be solar and wind. We have different kind of challenges here in Canada, and we talk about genomics and glycomics, and there's a lot of different things that we're excelling on. Looking at your idea from Israel and Finland, are they doing some of that, or is that something you think that's the direction we should be going for, more of that commercialization?
So I always worry a little bit about government or bureaucrats or anyone really, myself, picking winners. It's always hard to know what the next big thing is going to be. And so I think I think there probably is a limited role for that, but we don't want to put all our eggs into that basket. And the other thing is, if we're picking super high risk things, 1 out of 10 are going to succeed. And we're a relatively small country compared to the U.S., so we can only put so many, we can only place so many bets. And so we might get very little out of that.
I'm sorry, I have only limited time. My last question is, our college system seems to be, they work directly, and you said there's IP that's put in a drawer. And I think we've seen that sometimes that the IP generated, 80% of IP in Canada is in through our institutions, but it's hard to find that next bridge to commercialization. So the college system seems to engage with commercialization with projects already from the public, so the private sector. Do you think we should be looking at more of that angle with our institutions, and then finding ways to bridge that IP? Is that something that we should be looking at?
Absolutely. I think we need to find ways that we can do that with all of our institutions. Another model, by the way, is the Waterloo model, where the inventor or the researcher owns the IP, and that seems to be explains part of the success in this region, right? If you own it, you have much more incentive to commercialize it than if the benefit goes to someone else.
Yes, and I agree with that too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And to our witnesses, I really hope you can see just the interest you do have from this committee. Thanks, Mr. Williams. We're now going to go to Mr. Collins for 5 minutes,
Yep,
please.
thanks, Madam Chair. I have one quick question for Dr. McClatchy, and then I'm going to cede the rest of my time to my colleague, Mr. Maurice. And through you to Dr. McClatchy, we've only had a couple of students appear in front of the committee as witnesses, and obviously their testimony focused around the obvious in terms of tuition fees, student loans, and bursaries, and some of these are cross-jurisdictional issues that we share with the provinces. What are you hearing from your students as it relates to financial support? What would be the top priority from a recommendation standpoint, from a funding perspective, and I was hoping you could share with us what you're hearing from your students there at your institution.
Thank you. I think very much it is what the other speakers have spoken about, which is increasing the dollar value of the scholarships. These scholarships do go to the our best students, and I think that's a real opportunity. I also think that the number of scholarships has stagnated as well, so increasing the numbers, and I think tied to that is really looking at what additional programs can do to make sure that we're getting the widest pool of students who to have access to these students, including those students who are first-gen students who are coming from equity deserving groups who need additional supports to see science, see technology, see innovation as opportunities for them because they may have had lesser exposure and lesser opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Collins, for your kindness here, and thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to all the witnesses as well. I will admit I'm particularly proud tonight seeing two different witnesses from Waterloo Region, both Dr. Blitt and Dr. McClatchy. I'm hoping I might have time for two questions to Dr. McClatchy. The first is just actually building on the ones from Mr. Bachrach earlier. And Dr. McClatchy, I really appreciate you spoke about students who don't have access to generational wealth. I will admit myself as a Laurier grad how helpful it was that my parents were able to help, despite also being in co-op. How significant that was to help me get through in my undergraduate time there. Can you speak about you mentioned the need for graduate and postgraduate supports. Can you share maybe in a minute or so some more specifics, the kind of graduate and postgraduate supports that the students you mentioned earlier you think need the most?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to use an undergraduate example. So as part of the NSERC program right now, there is our undergraduate awards to support students during summer terms. And there is a specific subgroup of that which is focused on supporting Indigenous students. One thing that we know about science and technology is that students who get access, especially during undergraduate, to research opportunities are more likely to go on and choose graduate programs, masters and masters and PhDs. And so, that kind of very special targeted scholarship for Indigenous students, is great for researchers. It's great for students. It allows the mentorship and the opportunities to undertake research and get that research bug going, which is really absolutely critical. And more programs like that target. I know that the government has the new scholarships targeted at for Black Canadians, and I think that again that is a really strategic way to go to support students we know are equity deserving and underrepresented.
Thanks, Dr. McClatchy. I hope the committee will take that under advisement. My last question is the Grad Students Association at Laurier has called out one of their core needs with respect to the cost of housing.
Yes.
And recognizing how that's gone through the roof across Waterloo Region and also across the country. I wonder if you could speak to that so that this committee can maybe keep that in mind also if we're thinking about keeping the best talent in Canada, how we need to address the cost of housing.
Mr. Morris, sorry, I hate to do this. Since you're out of time, perhaps you would like to ask Dr. McClatchy if she might like to table that.
I'll give her time to answer in my time when it comes to it.
I'm afraid this will be the end of the panel. I'm afraid. Would you like to ask that?
Yes, Dr. McClatchy, if you wouldn't mind sharing that in a written material afterwards, that's the only way it sounds like the committee can accept it. And thanks, Mr. Bacharach, for your attempt.
Your kindness. And you see, this is a very collegial committee. It's my job to say thank you to all of you. I hope you've had a good experience. It's wonderful to see parliamentarians being able to meet with the research community. Dr. Blitt and Dr. Montagna, we wish you good luck with your research. And to Drs. McClatchy and Perot, we will be watching your institutions. We thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for your expertise, your experience, and being so gracious. Suspended.
Thank you.
Good evening, and we're delighted to welcome our next panel tonight. And we have from AdMari Bioinnovations, we have Mr. Gordon McCauley, the President and Chief Executive Officer, and we have Dr. Yusuf Banani, the Chief Scientific Officer. From the Banting Research Foundation, we have Dr. Catherine Whiteside, who is the chair. To our witnesses, we want to welcome you. We're delighted you can have a conversation with us tonight. We look forward to hearing your expertise. So each group will be given 5 minutes. At the 4.5-minute mark, I will hold up a yellow card, which tells you you have 30 seconds left. We aim to be fair. And we will begin with AdMari Bioinnovations. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here this evening with my colleague, Dr. Yusuf Banani. We're here because Canada has an extraordinary research enterprise that punches well above its weight when measured against our competitors around the world, and we're only now just beginning to build a sustainable life sciences industry. We exist, AdMari exists to do just that. So we play a leadership role building companies, building ecosystems, and building talent. We build companies by finding compelling science in typically Canadian academic settings and bringing it into our own labs to build investable companies. Our team has a tremendous track record of doing this. We've helped build 27 companies that have attracted $1.4 billion worth of real risk capital, are worth about $3 billion today, and employ about 1,000 Canadians. We build ecosystems both physically and virtually. Our innovation centers in Montreal and Vancouver are home to 40 emerging companies employing about 500 Canadians. And our AdMari community digital ecosystem is home to about 1,500 active members. Most pertinent to this discussion is the work we do in building talent. We do this through the AdMari Academy that has 5 key programs that actively and successfully build the talent that we see needed in the Canadian life sciences industry. The Executive Institute is focused on a 10-month gender balance program to build the leadership talent required. Our bioinnovation scientist program is focused on the front-end postdoc and master's students, helping them apply their expertise in a commercial setting. We have a fellowship program for postdocs, a co-op program for undergrads, and finally, the Canadian Alliance for Skills Training in Life Sciences, or CASL, provides the global gold standard in biomanufacturing training. We are very proud of these programs, and we know that they work. 95% of the more than 500 alumni of the AdMari Academy work in the Canadian life sciences industry today. Ces programmes se développent grâce à des niveaux
These programs were developed thanks to record levels of new investment in Canada. Literally, we're talking about billions of dollars over the recent years. These are also supported by the record level of investment in public policies at all levels. These important capital investments represent significant employment opportunities for Canadians.
Canada is facing a serious shortage of life sciences talent to drive that growth. Our friends at BioTalent Canada tell us that during a pandemic, this industry added 8,500 jobs in 2020 and is poised to have 214,000 over the next few years. We doubt that the committee needs reminding that these are high-value, high-paying, sustained jobs situated at the heart of the economy of the future. So what should we do to help encourage this growth and seize this opportunity? We'd like to suggest 5 areas of focus. First, just look around our facilities in Montreal or Vancouver, and you will know that Canada is a highly sought-after destination for highly trained international students and seasoned experts. We need to continue the programs to attract these students and experts. We know that they're working, including the SWIFT visa program. We can improve them for sure, but we need more of these students. Second, tuition subsidies to students and wage subsidies to employers will go a long way to ensuring the rapid uptake of our existing programs to meet existing demand. Troisièmement, les stages pratiques.
And third, practical internships, such as our postdoctoral and core programs. They are very effective, and they have been significantly supporting the employment basis.
And colleges do an outstanding job, and we should ensure that their work and the work of supportive organizations like the Tri-Councils are fully supported. Fifth, scale is incredibly important. Our global competition is much larger. We cannot afford a piecemeal approach across the country. Candidly, the data show that piecemeal efforts have not worked in the past, and our pan-Canadian effort clearly does. Many of these jobs cannot be done remotely because they're in laboratories, but surely the pandemic has shown us that we can do this effectively where remote work is possible. So ensuring that Canadians have the tools and infrastructure to do this work from anywhere is critical. We thank you for the invitation and for the ongoing public policy support of our work, and would be delighted to answer questions if necessary.
Thank you so much, Mr. McCauley. We appreciate you being here. I'm going to go to the Banting Research Foundation next with Dr. Whiteside, because our third guest has joined us, but we'll give our guest a second. So, Dr. Whiteside, the floor is yours for 5 minutes, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me make sure yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Ed.
Madam Chair and members of the Standing Committee, thank you for this opportunity to witness for this very important topic, talent, research, and innovation, which directly aligns with the core mission of our foundation. Since 1925, our not-for-profit National Foundation has identified early career researchers in health and biomedicine across Canada within the first 3 years of their first faculty appointment to support their bold ideas and help launch their careers. To date, we've funded over 1,300 young health and biomedical researchers in all fields, ranging from biomedical engineering to public health, totaling $8.6 million at universities across Canada through our annual Discovery Awards program. Our alumni, including such luminaries as Janet Ressant and Henry Friesen, have gone on to secure major research funding, made outstanding discoveries, and have emerged as Canada's leaders in biomedical science. I have the privilege of chairing this foundation and wish to share with you our concern about the gap in federal support for our young research talent in health and biomedicine research in Canada, and our recommendations to address this gap. Canada faces significant health challenges that impact individuals, our healthcare systems, and our economy. Our most urgent health challenges include recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and the potential next pandemic, climate change, complex diseases such as diabetes, and an aging population. Successfully addressing these challenges to ensure a healthy population and economy requires investing in the people who will generate innovative solutions, driven in large part by the biomedical academic research community. Our federal government has invested in the training of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows whose bold ideas are often the most innovative within this community, and I'm quite aware of the advocacy for increased funding for this group. However, relative to peer countries, including the UK, Australia, Germany, and importantly, the United States, Canada is underinvesting in science and specifically in early career researchers in health and biomedicine who have been hired as assistant professors within the first 5 years of their academic careers. Unlike other countries, our federal granting agencies do not provide many early career researchers with sufficient competitive funding that would attract our best and brightest postdoctoral fellows to Canadian research faculty positions. The CIHR discontinued its Early Career Research Award program in 2014, and a review of the CIHR Banting postdoctoral fellows since 2014 indicates that 35% were recruited to a faculty position outside of Canada, representing a significant loss of top discovery talent. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Decade after decade, we have lost many of our most talented researchers who have been scooped up elsewhere because Canada cannot compete with the initial salary and research funding offered by other countries. Our Banting Discovery awardees, many of whom have trained abroad, in some of the most prestigious research centers across the globe indicate that although they accepted a faculty position in Canada, having rejected more lucrative offers from elsewhere, they know many Canadian colleagues who've accepted these offers, mostly in the United States. The first 5 years are the most difficult for early career researchers who must juggle setting up their independent research programs, acquiring competitive grant funding, establishing new families, dealing with the university teaching load, and for MDs, new clinical care responsibilities. It is particularly difficult for women and those who may be struggling with financial debt, some from lower socioeconomic backgrounds after many long years of training. This raises the issue of equity, diversity, and inclusion within our young research talent pool, particularly when we know that the research necessary to address health inequalities in Canada, such as Indigenous peoples' health challenges, must engage investigators from our diverse communities with lived experiential knowledge. Therefore, investing in early career researchers negatively impacts population health, healthcare resiliency, the competitiveness of the Canadian economy, and ultimately our ability to effectively attract and retain talent we need for innovation and its implementation. So our foundation, along with the Charles H. Best Foundation, has developed a proposal for a $100 million federal investment over the next 10 years for the recruitment and retention of investigators in health and biomedicine within the first 5 years of their initial faculty appointments. We have presented this proposal to 26 federal decision makers.
Dr. Whiteside, I hate to interrupt, especially as you're getting to
And I'm finished.
Okay.
And just to say that our proposal has received a very positive response.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
am sure the members are going to want to follow up and hear more of what you've got to say. So thank you for that. And now our last member we're going to hear for this panel is Dr. Mosca, who is a professor of the Institute for Quantum Computing from the University of Waterloo. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, merci pour cette opportunité.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Fishery of the Canadian education system. I was fortunate to then study at Oxford. I returned to Waterloo in 1999 as a faculty member to start a quantum computing group within its cryptography center. I grew this group, and in 2002, we founded the Institute for Quantum Computing. So I've helped recruit dozens of the world's top quantum computing researchers as faculty and postdocs, set up programs that have trained thousands of the top quantum researchers around the world. And while I was setting up this group at Waterloo, I also joined the effort to help found the Perimeter Institute. And a decade or so later, it was already ranked among the top theoretical physics centers worldwide. And over a decade ago, I started focusing my energies more on seizing the opportunities we'd been creating, raising awareness about IP protection and management amongst academics in my field, reaching out to industry on how to protect against quantum-enabled cyber attacks, and so on. I started my own company. I helped others start their companies. I started with others a quantum industry consortium to help translate research opportunity into economic success for Canada. So now to the point of this committee, I think in short, to attract and retain the best talent, we need to offer people the opportunity to achieve their potential. That's why I left Oxford to return to Waterloo. Waterloo was the perfect place to drive this vision for a world-leading quantum center at the time, with a very supportive ecosystem that I was joining. There may have been comparable places, but there was no better place. Now, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in translating this opportunity that we create into actual, economic prosperity impact for Canadians is we're late adopters of this innovation. And so we keep creating these world-changing opportunities, and then we watch them evaporate in the end game. So we need to tackle that head-on and aggressively. I know we've tried. We've been trying for a long time. We just need to do better. So I have 4 recommendations. The first one is to keep supporting what we're good at, right? We're amazing at creating these opportunities. We do great fundamental research, applied research, great training, startups, incubators. There's room for improvement, and we've been hearing ways we can improve our fundamental research capacity. And of course, we should try. But we have a long track record of creating amazing world-changing opportunities. So the next three recommendations are focused on what we can do to better seize those opportunities and retain the talent that we have and attract new talent. So the second recommendation is to stop scoring in our own net. And I'll give some examples. The first one is immigration. Just a few weeks ago, a star postdoc in cybersecurity in my group, she was waiting endlessly for her work permit to be renewed. She was unable to leave Canada in the meantime, so ultimately she resigned, right? And Europe was certainly happy to have her back. And we can give you countless examples of this, and not just recently, over many, many years. Another example of own goals, I would say, is when we set up what at the surface look like equal collaborations with like-minded partners. But then their programs are really optimized for commercialization. Government money flows to companies, they engage our academics, but then we show up, the instruments we bring to the table are really optimized for academic research, which is great for academic research, but there's a mismatch. And at the end of the day, we're risking really doing free R&D for others to commercialize. So we need to really not take a knife to a gunfight in these sorts of situations. Recommendation number 3 is we need to take a use it or lose it approach to the innovation opportunities. We often talk about how do we keep it here? How do we stop it from leaving? Use it or you're going to lose it, right? So we need to get better at being early adopters again. Now, Jim Collins at Stanford says that great companies fire lots of bullets, and that informs when and where to launch cannonballs. So when it comes to disruptive technologies like quantum, government departments and critical sectors of our economy need to be experimenting early to understand the impact of these technologies on their sectors. Knowing how disruptive tech is going to impact critical sectors of our economy cannot be done with a wait and see approach. There's just too much at stake. So, and we need, very importantly, to engage first-in-class Canadian companies whenever possible, and that will help us attract and retain first-rate talent. And my final recommendation, in a prioritized and principled way, we need to set up a broad Team Canada approach to owning the podium in areas we decide are critical for Canada and its strong values to prosper. This involves a mandate for the different elements of the Canadian government, industry, and academia to work together with support from the highest levels of all these sectors, whether it's being a leader in cybersecurity or quantum computing or whatever we decide. So we can identify when the existing structures are an obstacle to collective goals and figure out how to get the puck in the net. Merci pour votre attention, and thank you for your important work on this committee.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mosca. I'd like to thank all our witnesses. Thank you for coming, having a conversation with us tonight, and thank you for sharing your expertise, your ideas, and where the challenges are. We have a very interested committee. They want to ask you questions, so we're going to go to questions now. And the first round is for 6 minutes, and we begin with Mr. Tucker. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses tonight. And thank you, Dr. Mosca. I have some questions for you because we heard from the Perimeter Institute last week, and it was very interested in how they are approaching things. And you're along the same lines, the disruptive importance of being a disruptive technology out there. And I do appreciate some of your comments. I just want you to unpack a couple of them. One, bringing a knife to a gunfight. Is that strictly just on funding from the federal government?
There I was referring to when we basically brought in NSERC, which is amazing. I think they do phenomenal work, but they can't send money to a company. So they were doing their job. I mean, this is in no way whatsoever a criticism of NSERC, and they're being matched up with Innovate UK. So I'd rather be a company in the UK for this program than a company in Canada, right? Innovate UK sent money to a company which subcontracted to universities there. We were funding academics, and then our companies had to do the in-kind work and give extra cash to the academics, which is great for certain things, but not when the UK side or the EU side have the ability, or actually in the UK, they had to send the money to a company. So they were laser focused on commercialization. And, we wanted to be, but we didn't have the instruments to do that.
Right. And so just on that program, like it's like we're Boy Scouts here in Canada. Yeah. We do all this research and then our lunch gets stolen and then we're like, oh, we don't have any jobs. And where the commercialization of the products, which is very frustrating as a taxpayer and as a Canadian, I think most wouldn't understand that. You talked about the visas and we just lost a student. We had an instance in my riding in Saskatchewan and in Saskatoon University where they were having some immigration troubles. And you said this has been going on for years. Is there not like a 1-800 number, especially for creative geniuses that we need to stay in Canada and do the research that we could set up? Like, is there not, like, if you brought that example to your local MP, I'm not sure who represents your area, but did they not try to pick up the phone and help?
So we have done that over the years, and it helped. But I mean, it was a lot. I mean, several years ago, there was a spousal. The person couldn't bring his wife over, and that was obviously really hard on him. So sometimes it is escalated to that point. But for these cases, we tried hard. There isn't an easy 1-800 number for doing this. Would
you recommend that we have something like that for fast tracking visas or resolving or appealing problems that are raised on that?
I think for these super niche areas where, like, we need to think of these as, like the Toronto Raptors or Toronto Blue Jays, like
it's competition.
It's really hard. There's so few of them. We're working so hard to get them here. And then I'm not, I sympathize with all the challenges Immigration Canada has to deal with, right? I'm not throwing stones there, but we just need to figure out how do we escalate. And we're very cognizant of that. So we don't go calling our MP every time something isn't going our way. But we need a better process for that. I mean,
I would recommend
PRs are taking forever.
Whenever it's escalating that you're going to lose top talent, I would escalate that right away to your member of parliament. And if they're getting paid to do a job, then hopefully they can resolve this, because I do like your approach that this is a Team Canada and we are in the competition. The race is out there, and I don't know if Canada's winning this. And I do feel that you need to do that whenever that does occur. Can you unpack a little bit about use it or lose it? Are you talking about governments supporting and purchasing technology from these startups? Is that where that was coming from?
Yes, exactly. Like, we can't say we're not going to buy your stuff, we're not going to invest in your companies, but please don't leave Canada. I mean, that's not going to work. So, and I think there's real value add to engaging them, because I think with something really disruptive, you need to be ready or you'll be caught off guard. Do we know how quantum's going to impact our energy sector? Not really. Do we know how it's going to impact our health sector? Not really. Nobody knows perfectly, but we need to know, at least we don't have to outrun the bear, but we better know more than anyone else how it's gonna impact the critical sectors of our economy.
Which has got to be faster than the UK, as much as they're a good Commonwealth friend.
Yeah.
Right. Is there any? You talked about the UK about some of their funding that goes directly to companies. What are the other? What other programs are they doing if they're doing it better than us? How do they structure their supports?
And I'm not saying everyone else does a great job and we're terrible. Like, I mean, and the UK are our friends. We need to, I was just at the White House at a meeting discussing collaborations with other like-minded nations in this space. We do need a common quantum market, because we can't just build companies to serve only the Canadian market, and they build companies that only serve the UK market. So we have to find a nice balance. But I like they have these I forget what they call them now, but these sorts of clusters and areas of focus that bring together industry and academia. They have they're not moonshots, but they're kind of like a mini moonshot where it's really a collaborative effort toward a common goal. So I see, I think these kinds of program level initiatives they attempt anyway to do these things coherently. I think there's probably some important lessons to be learned there.
Dr. Mosca, I'm sorry to interrupt. That's the 6 minutes. I think it's worth underlining what Mr. Tucker said, that MPs do exist to help with the immigration. It's important the research community know that. Thank you very much, Mr. Tucker. And now we will go to Mr. Collins for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'll start with Mr. Macaulay, if I can. And one of his first points he talked about was the immigration issue. He referenced that Canada is a destination for international students. And I think our open and transparent immigration policies have benefited Canada over the last number of decades, in contrast with some of the policies we've seen adopted by the former U.S. administration, which put barriers up for people who wanted to travel to the United States, and they experienced a brain drain because of that for the 4 years that occurred. And so we were the beneficiaries of that. So I think it's very important with the comments that we've received tonight and from other witnesses that we emphasize that we have an immigration system that works, although there certainly have been some hoops and hurdles recently. And so I wanted to ask Mr. Macaulay from Admare as to, is he experiencing some of those same issues that Dr. Mosca referenced earlier and elaborated on? Is it becoming a barrier, or is it more of a nuisance? And so maybe I can put it that way. Through you, Madam Chair.
I think it's certainly the case that we are seeing some of those. I would call them more nuisances than roadblocks. There are challenges in working through some of the visa situations. I can think anecdotally, like Dr. Mosca, of an example that we have right now of trying to work through the visa situation with one of our key employees. But to your question, I would say it's more of a nuisance, and again, like Dr. Mosca's comments, we tend to be advocating pretty aggressively on behalf of our colleagues.
Thanks, Mr. Macaulay. Subsequent question is along the lines of the equity, diversity, and inclusion. There's 3 witnesses, Madam Chair, tonight who've referenced that. That hasn't been a common theme through some of the past witnesses, and so I was very happy, Mr. Macaulay, to hear you reference, I think, your gender balance program, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on that program or others that you have that seek to improve the EDI subject at Admare.
So we're very proud of the fact that program, specifically the Executive Institute, candidly, this industry has a lot of work to do in identifying and promoting talent from gender-seeking groups. We deliberately said with that program that it would be 50-50 men and women. It would broadly reflect the diversity of Canada. And I'm really proud of the work that my colleagues have done in that regard, because they have worked very hard to find and promote those equity-seeking candidates, and it's worked very well. I'd also say we do the same thing in other programs. In the Bioinnovation Scientist program that looks more at entry-level kind of scientists, is equally supporting candidates from equity-seeking groups, and we're very proud of that work. I think we've got a lot of work to do, and I think there are specific equity-seeking groups where it is particularly difficult, and it's just going to be harder work, but we're totally committed to doing it.
Thanks for that. Switching gears, Dr. Whiteside, you also referenced EDI, and I believe it is one of your recommendations that you had provided to us. Is it part of the $100 million investment over 10 years? And so you raised it in the context of seeking financial support for it, or you raised it in the context of advising that it is a priority for the foundation?
Well, it's certainly a priority for our foundation, and yes, it is certainly part of our recommendation for a new early career investigator program. It's, I think, absolutely crucial that we take into consideration the barriers that are currently in existence. The good news is that our institutions are really beginning to address this very aggressively. And I think we're in a great position to make investments now, new investments, that will improve the recruitment of women and equity-seeking groups, and also provide them with mentorship. I think one of the key success factors is to provide mentorship at every level, starting through graduate training, postdoctoral training, but in particular, early career investigators have a long road to hoe in their first 5 years, and being able to provide more direct mentorship deliberately and across the country in this particular group will, I think, help to address the EDI issues as well.
Thanks, Dr. Whiteside. I have less than a minute left, and if I could ask you to elaborate on your recommendations for the federal granting agencies. So you did raise that in your opening, but it was a very brief reference. And so could you provide some meat on the bone as it relates to what you're suggesting occur as part of this study in relation to the federal granting agencies?
Yes, very specifically, I think early career investigators should be offered the opportunity for a higher rate of funding through increased funding overall for researcher-led programs, and CIHR is a great example. Last year, only 20% of early career investigators received grants and had to compete against more senior investigators who had a higher rate of funding at about 23%. It's still very low, but I think the early career investigators really need to be looked at independently.
Thank you so much, Mr. Collins. And we really appreciate all you coming and sharing your expertise. Maintenant, je vous passe la parole à Ms.
Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Blanchet-Jonca. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to salute all the witnesses appearing tonight. I have a question to Mr. Macaulay. In early 2000s, Montreal was a hub of the global pharmaceutical industry. But we are now potentially looking at multiple key players of the sector leaving. What do you think have been the key factors in arriving at a potential situation like this one in Quebec and in Canada?
I think it is without question that in the early 2000s, it was a very challenging time as global pharmaceutical companies restructured their research enterprise. A number of organizations, like one of our predecessor organizations, grew out of that, and we took over and acquired the research hub of a global player in Ville-Saint-Laurent, and have turned it into a vibrant innovation center in Canada. And I think it is actually very exciting to see the kind of growth and development in Canada and the attitudinal shift of researchers and entrepreneurs in Canada to build here companies that can grow and scale here to be globally competitive. When we first started out, say 5 years ago, one of the things that distinguished Canada relative to our competitors globally is that we were the only advanced pharma market in the world without a domestic research-based anchor company by the classic definition. We find ourselves today with certainly 2 anchor companies by that definition, and probably, depending on who you want to ask, 10 to 12 putative anchor companies. So I'm very excited about the growth that's happening in this space. Lots more to do, but I think Canada is absolutely poised to be leading the world in this regard.
Merci, Monsieur Macaulay.
Thank you, Mr. Macaulay. Of course, you're giving us good news. Recently, Moderna announced that they will be coming back to Montreal to produce about 100 million doses per year. Of course, great news to attract and retain talent in Quebec. But at the same time, what measures should the federal government take to make sure that this good news will be one in a series of good news?
Mais il est vraiment le cas que
it is indeed the case that there are extraordinary news.
You look at Precision Nanosystems in Vancouver, you look at BioVectra in Atlantic Canada, you look at J&J, a number of other major pharma companies. I think we've seen an extraordinary resurgence and let's be honest, we learned some lessons through the pandemic about the need to maintain and build this infrastructure in Canada. But I find it very exciting to see companies, and the Moderna example that you cited is just the latest, I think, of a number that have come. I think the data point to a very strong picture for the ecosystem. And again, the challenge now is not to sit back and congratulate ourselves, but continue to do the work that's necessary to build the ecosystem in Quebec and across Canada.
Merci, M. McCauley. Thank you, Mr. McCauley. We have learned this throughout the pandemic. Of course, Canada is the only country in the G7 not to have produced a vaccine against COVID-19, but we're still looking at the significant infrastructure created in the early 2000s in the pharmaceutical fields. Are there other mistakes from the past that we should not reproduce?
I guess I can't resist pointing out how exciting it is that virtually every vaccine in the world has Canadian research based in it. And certainly when you look at the lipid nanoparticle technology that is centered in British Columbia with Dr. Peter Cullis and others, it's very exciting to, I think, all of us in the field to see that technology coming to the fore in vaccines, literally virtually every vaccine in the world. And I think we've also seen other manufacturing advances that are quite helpful as well. Again, there is a lot more work to do. I think, again, we would be making a mistake to rest on this progress. I think we need to make sure that we continue to build the manufacturing infrastructure, we continue to build the industry. And again, relative to the work of this committee, I am really interested in encouraging public policy makers to focus on the talent that we need to respond to those jobs. We've seen from third-party measures, the biotalent study that I referenced, there is a significant opportunity for the attraction and growth of talent in this space. We need to make sure that we continue to support that effort.
Merci, M. McCauley. Thank you, Mr. McCauley. I would like to continue with Madam Whiteside. Do you think that the federal government has done enough to support STAR researchers?
Well, I'd say that certainly the programs in place, like the Canada Research Chairs and the Canada Excellence Research Chairs, have been terrific. I'm a former Dean of Medicine at the University of Toronto, and these programs have really been a lifeblood for recruiting and sustaining some of our most excellent scientists and researchers. However, it's still not enough. I think if you look at the per capita funding,
Dr. Whiteside, I'm sorry to do this.
It is the worst.
Okay. It's the worst part of this job. Monsieur Blanchet-Jeancat.
Madame la Présidente, je vais demander à Madame Whiteside.
Madam Chair, I will ask Madam Whiteside, if possible, to submit an answer to us in writing.
Pleased to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. We will go on to Mr. Bachrach for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and perhaps I'll give the first 30 seconds or minute of my time back to Dr. Whiteside if she'd like to finish her response to my colleague.
Thank you. My experience is that these programs, which have been excellent, have really been subsumed mostly within the budgets of the departments and the faculties. In other words, they've just become part of base. And I think if we want to really stimulate the recruitment of new talent along the line of what Mr. McCauley has suggested, that we need new funding, and this funding should be competitive, and it really should be for the best and the brightest, and it should be really competitive with organizations like the Wellcome Trust in the UK and Howard Hughes in the US. I think that's really where we need to go.
Thank you, Dr. Whiteside. I'm going to ask you another question on a somewhat related topic. I asked a previous witness about this letter that was released by a group of 270 university professors, including 2 Nobel laureates and 37 recipients of the Order of Canada, calling on the government to increase federal scholarships, both for graduate students and postgraduate students. And I note in your testimony that that your organization, the Banting Research Foundation, has proposed a $100 million federal investment towards, specifically, I believe, towards researchers in the health and biomedical sciences field. Now, there's only so much federal funding. If there was $100 million, it seems like there's another proposal to increase graduate scholarships in general. Would that achieve a similar end to what you're proposing with this $100 million fund? Is much more money needed across the ecosystem in general? I don't know if that question's clear, but.
Sure. Well, let me say that the increased support for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows is absolutely crucial. The percent of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows funded through those federal funds, though, is quite a small percent. The vast majority of funding for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows come from the universities, hospital-based research institutes, and the granting sources to researchers, their supervisors, as well as, and quite a bit of that is TA support, teaching assistant support that you heard in the last session. So, but I couldn't agree more that the value of the graduate students and postdoctoral fellowship awards should be on par with inflation, and I strongly support that. Nevertheless, the $100 million investment in new recruits, this is different. This is for faculty positions, and in the first 5 years of an assistant professor's career. So it is along the line of the same pathway, but it would enable us to take those postdoctoral fellows who are really the most innovative and really are going to support our best research in Canada to be recruited with the type of funding that is competitive internationally. And so my recommendation is that both are required.
Thank you so much for explaining the distinction there, and I think that's really valuable information. We've heard from a previous witness about the shift in universities away from tenure-track faculty towards more sessional lecturers, part-time contracts, that sort of thing, and that the percentage of university budgets dedicated to tenure-track professors has decreased over time as universities focus on other priorities. I'm not sure if you're in a position to comment on that and how that contributes to the overall trend that we're seeing around retaining and attracting top talent in these fields, but perhaps you could offer your thoughts.
Well, I think university budgets are of considerable importance in terms of where their budget comes from. So it is true that in most universities across Canada, the amount of base budget to support tenured faculty is fairly flat, if not even in decline. And so that puts a lot of onus on the universities, and I'll mention the hospital-based research institutes, many of whom do not have tenured faculty. This requires new lines of revenue. So it's always a balance, and I would say that the more external funding we can bring in a competitive way for top-ranked, in this case, researchers, talent, to support tenure-track positions would be a great investment. The ability to enable universities to have that kind of salary support and initial funding is all the universities are struggling with that today in Canada. And I think, again, it would be strategic. It should be aligned, in my view, with some of the key priorities that the federal government sees as their areas of innovation. And I believe it can be really an opportunity that is great today in Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach, and thank you to the witnesses. We're now going to go to the second round for this panel, and we start with Mr. Soroka for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to all the witnesses for coming this evening. We're going to start with Dr. Mosca. You mentioned your colleague who resigned due to a faulty immigration system. How do you think the Canadian immigration point system can be further improved to be more inclusive for foreign credentials with regards to innovation and retaining people with the education to spearhead our innovation?
Yeah, so that wasn't the issue in her case. Just to be clear, I think it was just a backlog issue. Her scores were off the charts. We don't know what the issue was. I think it was purely a backlog issue, and I'm very sympathetic to all the challenges they've been under with, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and COVID and everything. The point system, I don't know. It's changed a lot since my parents came here 50 years ago. My dad was a cabinet maker, didn't have a problem getting in because we needed cabinet makers, but I'm not sure how well aligned the current system is with our economic needs across the spectrum, whether it's high end or just specifically, skilled laborers. I think it, I'm sure that I'm guessing there's room for improvement there too, but I'm not so familiar with the system now.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I guess I was just concerned when you say we really don't know what the problem was other than the backlog. So I guess that's a concern for me is, how do we improve this if it's not working effectively?
Yeah, it's a bit of a black box mystery where they do try to. She tried very hard to find out, and she sought a lot of help, and it was really hard to get color into what was going on. Other than you're in the queue, please be patient.
Thank you for that. Dr. Whiteside, the Banting Research Foundation introduced a strategy in their annual report for 2021 by creating an opportunity for Sustainable Discovery Award program. What barriers do you face in implementing this strategy, and how can it be better supported?
Well, the key barrier for us is really funding. And, we're a relatively small foundation. And I think we really are able to provide a limited number of pilot and feasibility awards each year. And just to give you an example, we usually have around 60 applicants. These are individuals in their first 3 years of an assistant professor position. And we're able to fund anywhere between 6 and 8. Last year, it was a bumper year. We were able to fund 12 because we've been building our strategy around stakeholder sponsors. And, I think these are, again, amazing investigators. And to a person, they have said to us, if we had an opportunity to compete for salary support and better funding when we first came on, within the first few years, we could have accelerated our programs. We could have really realized our bold ideas much more quickly and been able to provide better impact with regard to our bold ideas in our research. So this is really an issue of funding.
Okay, well then also I guess my question is, when you're dealing with the marginalized communities as well, how are you able to help them? Because if funding is such an issue, is that another area where it's lacking quite a bit?
Absolutely, and I really applaud the federal government for some of their directed support now for the Black community, for Indigenous. That's definitely on the right track, and we need more, and we need to understand how to most strategically deploy those funds. Again, working with universities, working with even earlier, for instance, summer programs for high schools to really get the pipeline built in terms of capacity. And I think, again, all of these programs could be working together, could be networked across Canada in a way that I think really could build this capacity and address these matters.
How's that possible? I'm almost out of time, Madam Chair.
5 seconds, my friend.
Well, Dr. Whiteside, just quickly, we've heard from other researchers or witnesses how women have been disproportionately or disadvantaged with scientific research and that. Could you provide any information on that as well quickly, or please have it in writing to us for the future as well?
I'm afraid.
Well, I can.
I'm afraid, as
Happy
much
to
as
put it in
I know
writing.
the committee wants to hear this, I think it's going to have to be in writing unless someone else picks this up. Thank you, Mr. Soroka. And with that, we will go to Monsieur Lauzon.
Yes, great questions. I just want to continue on about the same question, but more specific for women researchers. In the early career there, can you talk with us about the parental leave, about how they can get their pregnancy during their research? And they now get, I think, 12 months across granting agency. And can you talk to us about that?
Yes, the granting agencies have really got very good parental leave plans and policies, as do the universities. And generally in Canada, in fact, in that case, we do much better than the U.S. And so I really feel that the policies that are in place today are reasonably fair. I think, though, the issue is much deeper. And I know the Honourable Kirsty Duncan is an expert in this, and I've heard her speak about it. Really, there are still biases in the system with regard to hiring and promotion. And I think that's really where we need much more support for educating our colleagues and really putting in place the necessary checks and balances in the context of both hiring and promoting within academia, particularly in the research areas where often there's a male dominance, shall I say. We still see this in engineering, in computer science, in the STEM areas, and we really need to be promoting women and equity groups within these areas to cash in on the great talent we have in Canada.
Thanks for the answer, a very complete answer. Je vais vous poser.
I will ask another question to you again, because what I kept from the Banting Research Foundation, what I remember is really the arrival of insulin and the science history that followed.
It's genetic, and we have to live with that. And I just want to thank you about those research. And but I want to come back to the study.
Quebec represents about 23% in your report, the report you published in 2011, but 5% of bursary receivers. Ontario has 33.8%, but 43% of those of the bursary receivers are from Ontario. So is there disparity between provinces? Is there inequality between provinces? How do you explain that? Are those provinces that are more rural compared to provinces with greater centers? Is that the cause of the disparity or something else?
So just to be clear, you're talking about the Banting Research Foundation Discovery Award Program?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes. So the distribution of awards is based strictly on the applicants that we receive. One of our issues is that for many years, until just recently, we're only accepting applications in English. So that could have been a detriment to early career investigators. We have supported investigators from over 30 different institutions across Canada. On a percent basis, in terms of population, I would say we're doing reasonably well in terms of distribution. But both the language issue, which we have now fixed, we can accept applications and review in both languages. But also, I would say Quebec is much better at supporting their early career investigators than the other provinces. You know, you have a granting agency, long-standing, that has been quite supportive. And that may also be part of the equation here. I don't think I can be more specific, but we certainly welcome applications from Quebec.
Merci.
Thank you.
Je vais revenir.
Now, just coming back to Mr. Macaulay's question. On the 5th of May, we had a witness who made me think about your organization, Mr. Baziri, Apple Boards, one of the companies that's growing the fastest in Canada.
Perhaps you might ask the witnesses if they'd like to table a written response. I'm sorry.
I finished my time. I thought I had 15 minutes today.
I know. I was trying.
Oh, I didn't see you. All right. Well, okay.
Would you
I'll
like
come
to
back
ask
with
them if they would like to table a written response?
Yeah, that's okay. But I don't even have time to ask my question, but I think I will send in my question.
Okay. Thank you, Monsieur Lauzon. To all of you, thank you for being so gracious. Thank you for having a conversation. We're really starting a conversation in this country between parliamentarians and researchers, and we're so grateful for your expertise. You can see you have a really interested committee. We thank you for tonight, and we hope you'll want to come back. Thank you very much. Suspended. and Institutes Canada, we have President and Chief Executive Officer Denise Amiot. Welcome. From Genome Canada, again returning, and we're delighted to have you coming back. Dr. Robert Annan, who's the President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome. And Perry Johnson, the Vice President, Policy and Public Affairs. It's nice to have all of you. And from the University of Calgary, we welcome President and Vice Chancellor Ed McCauley. Welcome. We're grateful for your expertise tonight. Dear colleagues, you'll be given 5 minutes for each group. At the 4.5-minute mark, I will hold this up so you know there's 30 seconds left. We aim to be fair, and we can't wait to hear from you. We will begin with colleges and institutes. Denise, Ms. Amiot, the floor is yours.
Good evening. I'm speaking from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. I am pleased to be here again on behalf of our 142 publicly supported colleges, cégeps, institutes, and polytechnics. Colleges and institutes are driven by demand. They anticipate the needs of our economy. Then they train, they upskill, or they reskill thinkers and doers. They are vital to making Canada future-proof. Colleges and institutes ensure that Canadians are ready for any and all challenges that could arise in 6 months, a year, 2 weeks, 10 years, or 20 years. Right now, this includes programs in, for example, in biotechnology, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence, to name a few. We offer those in nearly 700 locations across the country. Nos membres sont agiles et
Our members are agile and they can pivot in order to respond to the changing needs of the labor market, such as labor shortages in healthcare services, and offer a formation for sustainable employment opportunities towards net zero goals. When it comes to applied research, we are trying to let employers, especially SMEs, to come into contact with researchers and students to improve or develop new products, procedures, or services. And in this way, they tap into a highly qualified labor force and they get the capacity to retain the top talent in their communities.
Business-led applied research and the talent pipeline it provides is growing. In 2 years, we saw a 42% increase from private sector investment in applied research. And now, for each federal dollar, there is a dollar from the private sector. And a 45% increase of students participating in applied research. This is some of the latest data from our applied research survey, which we will be submitting to the committee. And it points to growth in all directions. More projects, more partnerships, more solutions, more students, and more dollars. The success paints a picture of what applied research already offers Canada's innovation ecosystem and what we can still achieve if we think more strategically about investment. This is why we are making the following recommendations. 1, make permanent the temporary funding the college sector receives for 2 years to support applied research. 2, expand SME participation in the R&D ecosystem by investing $40 million per year in business innovation engagement services located in colleges, institutes, and polytechnics. 3, boost Canada's talent pool through the development and implementations of permanent residency streams for international students graduating from colleges and develop a national employment pipeline for skilled newcomers. That this committee dedicate a study specifically to applied research and how we can scale this approach to maximize its potential for our economy. Why? Because of the immense potential that applied research presents for talent, development, and innovation in Canada. Grâce à la recherche appliquée.
Thanks to applied research, our system provides a direct talent pipeline towards local economies across the country. We're talking about a Canadian solution that has been tested and has unexploited potential. So our sector is ready to become part of the success, and we want to do more, but we do need support to be able to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Amio. We're delighted to see you tonight. We will now go to Genome Canada. I think Dr. Anand's speaking, or you're sharing time. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'm joining you today from Ottawa on the unceded traditional land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. It's a real pleasure to be back again at committee, along with my colleague Perry Johnston, to discuss this important topic. It's one that we think about all the time at Genome Canada. We're a national not-for-profit organization that invests in genomics talent, research, and innovation to develop and deploy solutions to Canada's major challenges in health, climate action, and food security. We work with a pan-Canadian network of 6 regional genome centers to align academic institutions, hospitals, government, and industry in shared large-scale research projects that are the foundation of life science innovation. Genome Canada has a 20-year track record of investing in Canada's researchers and trainees in genomics and related biosciences. A brief reminder, genomics describes the science of genetic information, the digital code at the foundation of all life sciences. It is the language of living systems and underscores everything from vaccine development to cancer treatments and from agriculture to environmental monitoring. We're very proud of the role we've played in laying the foundation for amazing Canadian research, treatments, and technologies in life sciences that have been deployed both before and during COVID, and which will continue to support important work in future health innovation, food security, and climate action. Indeed, the tools and technologies being developed today will change our world during the next 20 years in the same way that the digital revolution changed our world during the last 20. At the same time, we also need to ensure we're training the future innovators, researchers, and workers. We need to ensure that we have just as many young people being trained in the biological code as we have with the digital code. It is they who will drive innovation in healthcare, agriculture and agri-food, and sustainable biomanufacturing. At Genome Canada, we take training seriously. Since 2000, we have supported almost 6,000 trainees through our research programs. Those early trainees have become the backbone of Canada's genomics ecosystem, our researchers, our technicians, and our entrepreneurs. Our research projects are not confined to university labs. We support applied research involving an end user, industry or otherwise, so that students learn how to translate ideas into impact. We're proud that our projects have spun out more than 100 startup companies, many of which were started by or with the trainees working on them. But we need more people trained or retrained in this area in order to meet tomorrow's demand. And that's what we are working on. As I said, we take talent seriously at Genome Canada. We refer to our strategy around talent as the 3 I's. First, we are increasingly intentional. We have a proud history of supporting students. Traditionally, we let this flow organically from our research strategy. But today, we are intentional in developing a talent strategy linked to deriving specific outcomes. We're talking directly with industry and other end users to understand their needs and opportunities. And we're including specific initiatives for capacity building and training into our research opportunities with ecosystem partners like Admare. Second, we believe talent must be interdisciplinary. At Genome Canada, we employ a challenge-driven approach to address big issues. All of our projects involve interdisciplinary teams of researchers, including social scientists. Genomics involves cutting-edge technology, but effective implementation requires understanding its economic, environmental, ethical, legal, and social implications, how genomics works in society. We fund research and trainees in all of these areas and work with ecosystem partners like MyTax to support opportunities to match research skills with work-integrated learning. Third, we believe talent must be inclusive. Historically, the research community has not supported a diverse and representative population of trainees. This limits our pool of ideas and narrows the scope of potential innovation. We must diversify the pipeline of talent in Canada and ensure that students from a diverse set of backgrounds are able to contribute to advancing this work. This includes developing new models for engaging with trainees from Indigenous backgrounds. Supporting their leadership will be essential for us to redress the inequities and injustices that have been done to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in Canada, particularly in medicine and genetic research. We're proud to support the summer internship program for Indigenous peoples in genomics, SING Canada. Led out of the University of Alberta, it is designed to build Indigenous capacity and genomics literacy among undergraduate and graduate students, postdoctoral, and community fellows from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities across Canada. In conclusion, it is clear that Canada needs a life science skills strategy as part of our research and innovation imperative. We have enormous needs and opportunities as the life science revolution proceeds. We are proud to support foundational training in genomics, the digital code of biology, and are keen to work with this committee and others across Canada to ensure we're equipped for today's challenges and tomorrow's opportunities. There remains so much to do. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Anand. We will now go to Dr. Macaulay, the president from the University of Calgary. We welcome you tonight. The floor is yours.
Merci. J'apprécie l'opportunité d'adresser ce.
I appreciate the opportunity of appearing before this committee this evening.
The University of Calgary is a place to start something. A new research project, a new business, a new movement to improve the world. But at the heart of anything new are the people who start it, our talent, which is why I'm so pleased to be with you today to talk about the role our federal government can play in fostering talent, retention, research, and innovation. I believe there are three things that our federal government could do to really make a difference. First, increase support to top students. Second, invest more in the Federal Research Chairs Program. And third, expand targeted federal investments for innovation supports for universities to catalyze private sector collaboration. And I want to explain why these investments are so important through an example. For many years, the University of Calgary has been growing its expertise in quantum science. Because quantum science isn't just fascinating research, it has real-life applications for Canadians and is expected to contribute $142 billion in revenues and 229,000 jobs by 2040. Jobs across all sectors: health, finance, agriculture, energy, transportation, logistics. In 2021, the University of Calgary successfully attracted the global computer giant Emphasis to establish its Canadian headquarters in Calgary. Emphasis decided to partner with the University of Calgary for three reasons. First, our excellence in quantum research. Second, our ability to generate job-ready talent. And third, the potential to be part of a quantum ecosystem with post-secondaries and quantum company startups. And as part of the deal, Emphasis will immediately create 1,000 jobs in Calgary and invest in 1,000 work-integrated learning opportunities for students. In short, this is exactly what universities across Canada can and should be doing to attract and retain talent, both researchers and students. But the challenge is that for every one Emphasis, there are many more that could happen if we made bigger and better investments in retaining research and student talent, if universities had the resources to create and pursue these kinds of partnerships in a systematic way. So how do we make more success stories like Emphasis happen with universities across the country? First, the federal government can invest to improve the recruitment and retention of top graduate students and trainees. Companies like Emphasis are looking for access to top talent, and they're looking for universities and colleges to provide it. Research universities create a great student experience, and 94% of University of Calgary undergraduate students get jobs within 6 months of graduation. So we're great at creating talent, but as a country, we need more of it. To do that, we need to expand the number of tri-agency training awards to ensure our top talent doesn't leave Canada, and increase the value of these awards to make them competitive. We can also do better at attracting top international students and postdocs to come to Canada. Investments to increase the number and value of awards such as the Vanier Graduate Scholarships and Banting Postdoctoral Fellowships would support both domestic talent retention and international talent recruitment with significant long-term benefits for Canada's innovation and productivity. Second, Canada needs to improve federal funding programs to attract research talent. Emphasis partnered with University of Calgary because we had some of the world's top researchers. But we need to be able to keep developing and retaining those researchers. The Canada Research Chairs Program is a key program for post-secondary institutions in attracting and retaining top talent. The prestige of a CRC is attractive, but the funding levels have not changed in many years, making them less effective as a talent attraction tool. The Canada Excellence Research Chairs also attracts top talent. CRCs and CERCs have far-reaching impacts. They attract high-quality trainees, undergraduate and graduate students, and postdocs to contribute to Canada's talent pool. Additional investments to grow the number of CRCs and CERCs and increase the value of CRCs would support talent attraction and retention. Imagine if we created new funding streams for early career researchers that would renew and refresh university faculty with world-leading researchers. Finally, Canada needs a coordinated strategic approach to driving partnerships, innovation, and commercialization between Canada's university and the private sector to attract top talent involvement. Canada was able to build a great partnership with Emphasis. University of Calgary is #1 in Canada for startup creation and has created a rich innovation ecosystem which supports industry collaboration, new entrepreneurial ventures, and bringing research to market. But we can't scale this kind of potential without support, and neither can other universities across the country. Unlike other jurisdictions around the world, Canada does not have a coordinated national approach to stimulating and supporting university partnerships with industry. Additional targeted funding, federal investments for proven innovation supports for universities would help to expand the breadth and depth of partnership, engaging more researchers, students, and industries. In short, these investments would make success stories like Emphasis the norm. The competitiveness of Canada's economy and our future prosperity depends on retaining top talent and translating research into commercial opportunities. Strategic investments in Canada's university will attract and retain world-class researchers with wide-scale benefits for Canadian business and society. Talent is the magnet that Canada can use to attract global investment and companies, and I think that's what we all want. Thank you for your attention. Merci pour l'opportunité de parler.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity of sharing my opinions with you tonight.
President Macaulay, and again, I want to thank all of you. We're really starting a conversation in Canada between the research community and parliamentarians. So we thank you for your expertise, your experience, and your knowledge. And now our committee, it's a very committed, dedicated committee. They want to ask you questions. And tonight we begin with the 6-minute round, and we begin with Ms. Gladue. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to all the witnesses for being here tonight. We definitely value your work and your input on our study. I'm going to start with Genome Canada. So, there's a very specific talent you're looking for. How do we develop a genomics talent strategy for Canada?
Great. Thank you for the question, Ms. Gladue. I think it starts really, the foundation here is really to have a strong foundational ecosystem, and that includes certainly strong support for education in the K-12 system, which I know is not the purview of this committee, but opportunities through things like Let's Talk Science, for instance, to engage young people from a diverse set of backgrounds in science and research. And then we have, of course, undergraduate education, we have college education, and then we really do need to see support in labs, through fundamental research kind of support more broadly. And then from there, students, get the opportunities to build more specific skill sets. That's really where we come in. I mean, we work with students, as I said, from a variety of backgrounds. Genomics is a range of skills, backgrounds, and technologies, everything from computer science to engineering to all the social sciences I talked about. And so really a lot of people come in from different places, but you also have a lot of needs. We certainly found during the COVID pandemic, a lot of our shortages were in areas involving in kind of like medical technicians, for instance. And so we do need a lot of, I think, kind of broad cross-sectoral focus that includes, higher education in the colleges, universities, and certainly advanced research labs right across the country. And then targeted initiatives such as what we do, for instance, at Genome Canada.
And could you talk a little bit about some of the best practices that you have to attract and retain the talent that you have?
Sure. And, I might actually ask my colleague, Perry Johnston, to step in here. Perry is our Vice President of Policy and Public Affairs, and she's really been doing a lot of great work on talent and skills for us. So Perry, maybe I'll ask you to take the floor.
Sure. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Ms. Gladue, for the question. It's really a pleasure to be here at the committee tonight and talk about such a mission-critical initiative for Canada. With respect to, in our space, strategies for attracting and retaining talent, and what are some of the best practices? As Rob mentioned in his remarks, we have a track record of supporting over 6,000 trainees since Genome Canada's founding. And one of the critical pieces of success that's really worked in our space is the fact that we engage in partnered research, which means that we're very focused on working with end users, including industry and other partners, to define their needs right at the outset of the initiative. And that leads to their then building up receptor capacity for those students to then go on to be hired. In fact, in our initiatives, we have seen 2/3 of the students who have been working on our Genomics Applications Partnerships program gone on to be hired by the very projects in which they worked. So we're building receptor capacity thanks to the partnered approach we take. We also are very supportive through our research programs in the salaries and stipends for trainees. 70% of our research programs goes to supporting research trainees and researchers. And our investments are based on, like the granting councils, important benefits for those students. We have our salaries for trainees are not indexed to inflation, or are indexed to inflation, pardon me, so they grow with inflationary rises. And we also provide parental and maternal benefits as well for those students, similar to the granting councils. The final thing I'll say with respect to good practice is what Rob alluded to with respect to inclusive genomics. We're very conscious of the fact that we need to do more to ensure a diverse pipeline into our research programs. We've recently implemented a strategy for inclusion, accessibility, diversity, and equity to ensure that we're building through intentional program design a more systemic change to our policies and programs to promote more fair access, but also to ensure that we're fully supporting the range of talent in genomics. So those are some of the best practices that we are really trying to ensure that we have build and maintain to build a genomics pipeline in Canada.
Excellent, thank you. And now a question for Dr. McCauley. You talked about the Tri-Agency Training Award. What value would be a competitive value for that?
Thank you very much. The great thing about these training awards through the Tri-Councils is that those are opportunities available to students all across the country. So it really is providing stimulus to enable students to train throughout the variety of regions. I think I would hate to put a dollar value on it, but I think what would be good is to look at living wages and how they compare across the country, and then adjust the level of the scholarships associated.
Very good. And for Madame Amiot, so colleges are fundamental to creating the talent that we are going to need. There was a comment earlier about medical technologists, and I know that we are facing a crisis in this area. And I wondered if you could talk about, that resource and maybe some of the others that are getting scarce, and how colleges can best be a part, and what we could do as a federal government to help you do that. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, you are perfectly right. It is a big, big issue. And I have to say all the health sector technicians and technologies are in needs right now, whether it is a radiotherapist also or a radiologist, it is an issue. And what we do, of course, we train.
I am so sorry to interrupt. It is the worst part of this. We have these wonderful people.
I'll send you the answer.
Perhaps Ms. Gladue would like, yes, if you wouldn't mind sending it. Thank you so much. And with that, we will go to Mr. Chahal for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you to all the presenters in your testimony this evening. Probably no surprise, I'm going to start with Dr. McCauley from the University of Calgary, where I'm from, the city of Calgary, and a former alumni of the university. We heard earlier Dr. Macaulay, Dr. Mosca talked about the need for collaboration, and you actually answered a number of my questions in your opening. But I do want to dive a little deeper. How does the University of Calgary land with such the great opportunity, collaborate with an international company to bring 1,000 jobs and a center of excellence at your university? How do you do that, and what's the opportunity for future innovation in this space?
Thank you. The first prerequisite for attracting investment from around the world is talent. And we've been very fortunate, as I mentioned, and the federal government has provided incredible supports for help University of Calgary create that talent. I mean, the companies have choices where to go all over the world. They want to go where the talent exists, and that we're really fortunate. The second thing is that we've got very, very clear rules of engagement with industries. Our faculty and our students want to engage. We have a very, very clear and simple IP policy that is inventor-owned. We try to reduce all those barriers that might come up in terms of thinking about a partnership. So it really is talent, clear rules of engagement. And I think what we're missing, perhaps from the federal government that I alluded to, is an incentive structure to support that, in direct support for the universities to engage in those partnerships, but also an incentive, clear incentive structures for industries to actually locate in Canada.
Exactly where I wanted to go, what government can do to help support. You talked about a coordinated strategic approach and specific scaling support. What does that look like, if you could provide us some more information on that?
Sure. At the University of Calgary, we've created just quite remarkable entrepreneurial sort of structure. Ideas come up, they're picked up at different organizations, and in large part, our community, through CDL Rockies and other supports, actually drive the help to drive the company creation. As I mentioned, we're number one in the country right now in terms of company creation with community support. If we wanted to scale that to a much larger scale, then we might want to look to other jurisdictions like the UK, like in Germany, where the government actually provides with a critical set of feedbacks and constraints, support directly to the universities to build out those partnerships, because that's important funding that the universities need to actually do that. And then as well, the incentives for those industries in terms of taxation incentives or in terms of employment credits to actually land in the country.
Well, congratulations to you and the university, and emphasis for bringing 1,000 jobs to our local economy. It was much needed in attracting that, developing the talent and attracting great opportunities from abroad. How does diversity, multiculturalism impact your ability to attract companies from India and globally and other international students and researchers to Calgary?
Thank you. Calgary is fortunately one of Canada's most diverse cities. And so we've got a variety of different communities that are willingly open their arms to attract, to welcome students and scholars and faculty members from across the world. And we're really fortunate in that. The Canada Research Chair Program that I mentioned earlier is one of those avenues that universities have the ability to recruit from around the world. And CRCs and the expansion of the CRC program that the government has discussed really helps universities actually meet their equity, diversity, and inclusion targets. And I've worked with Minister Duncan on a variety of these in the past, including piloting the Dimensions program here at the University of Calgary. We have actually met our requirements for the equity and diversity targets set by the CRC program in 2019, and we will meet them for our 2022. This is a program the federal government supports that we can use to enhance EDI and attracting diverse scholars.
Thank you. Still to go? Oh, okay, great. I will move over to Genome Canada. You had mentioned the need for a life science skill strategy. Could you talk further about what a national strategy would look like?
Sure, thanks. I think the life sciences strategy is crucial right now just because of the global competitiveness when it comes to attracting talent. It's, it's no secret that that COVID caught everybody a little flat-footed, and suddenly everybody was trying to ramp up everything from testing to therapeutic development to vaccine production and so on, and that led to the massive shortages that both Ms. Gladue referenced and Ms. Amiot mentioned in her remarks. So I think step one is recognizing this is urgent, and then step two is a bit of a, in a sense, taking stock, I guess, across the country, talking to our companies, talking to our public health agencies, hospitals, and others to really get a sense of where are the pressure points, where are the bottlenecks, not just today, but looking down the road 5-10 years, and then using that as a basis to work with the ecosystem of institutions as well as funders to help make sure that we're building a pipeline to satisfy those needs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chahal, and we're glad that you could join us tonight. We will now go. Maintenant, je vous passe la parole.
Now I will hand it over to Mr. Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to welcome all of our witnesses for this third hour of the committee meeting. My first question will be to Madame Amiot from Colleges and Institutes Canada. What do you think the role CEGEPs and colleges can play to attract and retain talents at the local level, especially in rural communities? It's an excellent question. In fact, Statistics Canada published some numbers not so long ago, focusing on women, especially in rural communities, and I would be happy to send you some numbers from that document. But what it points to is that women in rural locations have a lower tendency to attend post-secondary studies, and when they do that, they prefer colleges for the most part. This is important for us because we are accessible, we are everywhere. I was saying that we have 700 locations throughout the country, and 95% of Canadians live in within 50 kilometers of one of our campuses, and 86% for Indigenous people would be the number. So when people study in their regions, they end up staying in their regions to continue living. And of course, we train people according to the needs of the labor market, so that means that people will be able to remain in their location and work there. Thank you. How would you describe the difference between the talent developed in CEGEPs and the talent developed in universities? Well, our institution established 52 years ago, so we are very young. And when the institution was created, it was with the purpose of serving communities across the country along the needs of the labor market. And when the institution was established, it was a given that we had to focus on placing students in a job within 6 months, and we also had to make sure that employers would be involved in the development of the curriculum, and that the students would have opportunities for internships. So the majority of our 10,000 programs, about 98% of our programs have compulsory internships. So these would be the three great characteristics of our colleges. And when you do research, this is done based on the problems outlined by the industry, or an NGO might have the same problems, of course, and we try to find solutions to these problems, and especially the company keeps the intellectual property. So this is some of the other great differences. I'll keep it at that because of time constraints, but that would be my answer. Thank you. What specific measures could be taken to further increase attraction and retention of top talents or students in CEGEPs and other institutions? Well, first of all, we have to make sure that the study permits for international students are issued more quickly with the pandemic. Of course, we had about 50% reduction in requests for study permits, but right now, as we speak, we have 40% more requests compared to the pre-pandemic levels, and we have doubled the number of requests from students coming from such places as Thailand, the Philippines, and Vietnam. So unfortunately, as we have found out, there is a significant backlog at the moment, keeping students from obtaining their study permits in a short amount of time. So a lot of students were held back by this. So about 140,000 students are in this backlog, as we've been told. So these students won't probably have access to our institutions in September. But something else that's also important is that students should have access to financing, and this to be able to continue their studies, but also to make sure that they have internship opportunities, paid internship opportunities. One example is that during the pandemic, of course, internships weren't very easy to access, but post-secondary institutions were given the opportunity to tap into internships previously not accessible for them. So this was a significant contribution to these institutions. These will be some of the examples. How do you think CEGEPs, colleges, and universities could work together, in your experience, to really bring forward the best bits of their respective knowledge and expertise in any field, in any domain? Yes. Well, collaboration is key. As I was saying, when we develop programs, we do this in line with the requirements of the business circles of the industry, and we engage them in the development of the curriculum. And we also work with universities, especially when it comes to applied research. So there are instances where all of this comes together. And I'm sorry.
It's an awful part of this. Thank you to you both.
Je reviens, Monsieur Blanchet.
To you both. And now we'll go to Mr. Bachrach for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Amio, I will stick with you with my first questions. I'm keen on picking up on a theme that we've heard a little bit about this evening, which is the idea of the government focusing its investment in certain areas where there are challenges facing society that are unique, and where it can maximize the value for its investment in innovation and applied research. And I noticed your SDG brooch, and I thought perhaps I would ask you specifically about the climate solution space, and whether the federal government is currently investing in colleges and institutes, applied research in that space, what that looks like, and what the potential is. What changes need to be made so that Canada is doing what it needs to do to invest in talent and applied research, specifically in the climate solutions space.
Absolutely. I will be pleased to share with you a report that we have tabled to the government on net zero climate, so that you will see a number of aspects, but it could be, for example, in training, it could be in applied research, and ensuring that the different entities, that the different colleges across the country also can talk to each other and do even better and share best practices. One of the things that we have noticed, I have examples of projects that have been done with respect to climate change, climate mitigation. I would be pleased to share those with you, but we could do way more. I gave you statistics with respect to the results we have obtained. Nobody else can say that for each dollar they get another dollar. And I don't believe we should focus only on some aspects, because I think this country is big and we need to ensure that we also look at what are the specific needs. For example, in the Atlantic, it may be needs with respect to the ocean, with respect to water management, but in the prairies, it would be something maybe with respect to smart farming and net zero. So we need to ensure we may have a big topic, but we need to take into consideration the different needs of the country to ensure that we served all Canadians.
Thank you, Ms. Amiot. Now, picking up on another theme we've talked a bit about, which is barriers to students who are seeking opportunities at institutions like the ones you represent. We talked about barriers faced by graduate and postgraduate researchers in terms of the fact that scholarships haven't kept up with inflation. A lot of students are living in poverty, having to obtain employment outside their field of research. Now, speaking specifically about colleges and institutes, what are the barriers that you see students facing as they come into your institutions?
So some of the barriers are with respect to mental health, definitely. It is a big issue. Some of the barriers are financial, because we are often the first door for those students at the college level, because they are the first one to go to post-secondary, or we are the last door because they tried many others. And we need to have access to wraparound services. Our classes only have 30 people in them, but there are some of the students that we have that need a lot of support. And they add support at elementary, at high school, but they arrive at post-secondary, and it's harder to get access to all that wraparound. And one of the things we have observed in the last 15 years, and I have a great slide that I will be pleased to share with you, is that at the post-secondary level, we have seen a diminution of the public funding across the country. And this is a big barrier, because it means that we cannot offer all the services that we should be able to offer to the students. And we need to ensure we have a robust public education system in Canada.
And finally, Ms. Amiot, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, are you seeing that the students coming to the institutions you represent are reflecting the goals around diversity and inclusion? And do diverse populations have the supports that they need? Is there something specific there around offering supports?
Yes, absolutely. Like students that are diverse, they also need support from a mental health perspective. They have financial barriers also, so they are not different. And for us, we have signed the 50-30 challenge that the government of Canada has put forward. In fact, we were one of the first signatory, and now we have been given the task to share with the business sector the guide that will be produced by KPMG for the government of Canada on ADI. But I'll just give you a statistics that is very interesting from a gender perspective. At the president level, and for me, this gives you a very good indication. At the president level, 38% of the presidents are women in our system. And so we're very, very pleased about that.
Ms.
And
Amiot,
of course, we would prefer it to be 50, but we're making progress.
Ms. Amiot, perhaps would you like to table those statistics with the committee?
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
absolutely.
Thank you so very much. We're going to now go to a second round. I know people are tired. I hope you're bearing with us, these wonderful witnesses. And we're going to go to it's 5-minute round and to Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And through you, and I'll continue with Ms. Amyo. So just to continue on conversation, with only 2% of tri-agency funding, colleges have produced significant and rapid results to benefit communities and businesses across the country. Can you specify how much more in funding colleges need to build on this and where these funds should be allocated between project support, operational support, et cetera?
Fabulous question. Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. In fact, what we need, as I said in my recommendation, is that we need to ensure that the 40 million that we got be given on a permanent basis. It was given as additional money, but just for 2 years. We need to ensure that it is every year. And we also need to have 40 millions to ensure that we can have, that we can engage even more. Because you see, you do a project. All the funding we have is project-based. But what happens, sometimes the company would like a bit more help. But no, you have to move to the next project because you don't have funding anymore. And it could help them with more the marketing. We could help them with looking at what could be the different use of the product that was done, at partnering maybe with someone else that have something that could be useful to add to this product. So there's a lot of accompagnement, a lot of support that could be offered, but because we don't have access to this operational funding, because when we were created, the faculty is to teach, it's not to do research, but we have incredible faculty that can do the research, but we don't have that support to be able to provide even better services. And because we're across the country, imagine the powerhouse of what it could offer to this country from a productivity point of view, from an innovations point of view, and from a commercializations point of view. And
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We only have so many minutes. I think I've heard you have 8,000 research partnerships producing over 5,500 products that are colleges. Yeah. Do you know the economic value of that per year?
We have, I wish I would have the money that I could do such a study. Unfortunately, I don't. I know that one of my college has done it. And it's just amazing. But I'll give you one example. Earlier, we were talking about jobs created in Calgary. So there's a college in Shawinigan, Cégep de Shawinigan. It's a very tiny, 1,000 students, 1,100 students there. They have amazing research capacity. They have 45 researchers full-time over there. And they were able to attract a company that have created 300 jobs because of the type of applied research that they were doing. So for me, this gives you an idea of the economic impact that those can do. I have other stories where companies were going to stop, to close because their product was not anymore in demand, or it was not popular. They approached the college. Guess what? Now they are producing a lot of products that are on the market, and not only in Canada, but around the world.
And Ms. Anya, who owns the IP that you develop through your system?
The company owns the IP. That's what is so special about college in Canada.
Thank you so much. Mr. McCauley, I think what you're doing is also just incredible in Calgary. Can you explain to me just a little bit more of Venture Own IP policy? So what does that entail?
Yes, and that's our IP policy is very similar to, for example, to many other universities across the country, where it's the creator that owns the IP. As the IP is being commercialized, then there's a negotiation that takes place, in some cases between the university and the inventor, for a share of that IP. We have very, very simple procedures at the University of Calgary for how that is done. And that creates the very clear procedures. Companies, for example, in CDL Rockies that are part of that, have put up their hands and said the University of Calgary is investable because clear IP and clear procedures around the IP commercialization.
Thank you so much. I wish I had 2 more hours, but thank you, Madam Chair. Off to you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. You are always on the mark here. We're so grateful to everyone. We're going to go for the last 5 minutes to Ms. Diab, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to all our presenters this evening. I have a question to Genome Canada, and feel free to whichever one of you would like to answer that. I was quite intrigued actually by your opening remarks where you talked about shared research projects and you talked about health, climate action, food insecurity, and the fact that you've supported 6,000 trainees, I think I wrote down here. Can you speak to me a little bit more about that and the biological code, as you called it? I found that very interesting rather than the digital code. So I'd be very interested and I'm sure the committee would be, to hear a little bit more on that perspective.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Diab. I'll say a few words about that. So, we work very closely with research institutions, like, for instance, Dalhousie University in Halifax, and our partners at Genome Atlantic, who are funded by the provincial government in Nova Scotia to build projects that are going to involve the university, hospitals, and often companies. So, for instance, we have a phenomenal project out of the pediatric hospital affiliated with Dalhousie, there, the IWK, that's looking at rare diseases, rare genetic diseases, and is part of a network we call the All for One Network, which is linked to pediatric hospitals across the country, phenomenal researchers, including a wonderful node at the University of Calgary, President McCauley knows about. And they're working very closely, and they train students who are doing genetic analysis, who are doing bioinformatics, and who are working in the clinic to help families with kids with rare diseases get faster diagnostics and better care. And so it's a really close partnership that involves the government of Nova Scotia as the healthcare system, the university and the hospital, and trainees. At the same time, we work with our partners at Genome Atlantic with a number of small companies in Nova Scotia on helping, for instance, build out kind of new industrial products. So, for instance, in things like aquaculture, when it comes to mussels and oysters and changing climate, we have work that goes on to help with breeding systems so that those breeding stocks will be adaptable to the changing temperature of our oceans. And that's with small businesses, local businesses based out of Nova Scotia, for instance. And in those cases, the students are the ones who are actually doing that work, working between the company and the university. So it's really these big partnership models that are geared towards, whether it's agriculture or aquaculture or in health, are always driving towards a real impact like that.
And that's really fantastic. We've talked a lot about in these studies about the different partnerships. And tonight, I think we talked about even between universities and colleges. But again, here with governments, different levels of government, but also hospitals and private. So I guess I picked a good question because I am a Nova Scotian and I'm familiar with some of those. Can I go to I guess the University of Calgary and then followed by Madame Amiot? Can you talk to us a little bit about the partnerships that you've established between colleges and universities, and how can we strengthen those partnerships? I guess what can we as a federal government do to help you strengthen those partnerships between the different educational sectors, but as well with the private sector and other players in the economy?
Thanks. I can give you 2 examples. One example is around work integrated learning. So instead of each institution in the city of Calgary doing their own thing, we created what we call the Calgary Consortium that includes SAIT, Polytechnic, Mount Royal University, St. Mary's, Alberta University of the Arts, to, as a collective, to really work with industry in the city to provide work integrated learning opportunities for our students. So rather than going in as one, we went in as a whole, and attracting federal dollars. In fact, there were federal dollars which helped to support that consortium. So thank you. I think it's a really, really good opportunity. The second one is we were awarded a Canada First Reaches Excellence Fund, and Minister Duncan is well aware of this one, in energy transition. And the University of Calgary partnered with SAIT. I think it was the only university in the country to partner with a polytechnic on the Canada First Reaches Excellence Fund, and established SAIT labs at the University of Calgary and labs at SAIT for ideas coming out of the University of Calgary to scale and prototype in the applied area.
Thank you very much, Ms. Diab. Thank you, President McCauley. And now it's my turn to say thank you. Thank you for being part of this starting conversation between the research community and parliamentarians. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for being champions in your institutions and organizations. And we look forward to learning more from you. Thank you for your expertise and your time. We will say good night to you and to this committee who worked so hard. 5 minutes of business. To all of you, good night.
Thank you.
Bye. First of all, thank you all. Yeah, just a tremendous group of people. First thing, our lovely analysts, we have now finished the 4 meetings we agreed to on the top talent. So our analysts are hoping we could give them drafting instructions. And I'm wondering, would the committee agree to issue the analysts the same drafting instructions, different motion, as the previous study, that they would draft a report including recommendations drawn from testimony? Mr. McKinnon.
It's a great idea.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. I see Ms. Gladue. Ms. Gladue?
Yes, Chair. Absolutely. I think the analysts did such an amazing job on the last report that I would be happy to have them take a crack at it. And then certainly we can give some consideration to any additions that we would want to make after the fact. The other thing I would recommend is when we're going to add committee business at the last minute, it seems like the committee's always going over time. It might be prudent to plan 45 minutes for each panel session if we're going to do that. Thanks.
Very excellent recommendation, Ms. Gladue. So would everyone be comfortable with the same? Hands up if they agree. So it looks like we've got a majority. So to our wonderful analysts, we can do that then, same as last time. One last piece, dear friends, and Ms. Gladue, I take your excellent recommendation to heart. Thank you very much. We've been given the go-ahead in order to provide a detailed budget for the travel. Now, so our excellent clerk has distributed a budget, and first of all, we need to, is there agreement with the budget? Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
Okay, yes from Mr. McKinnon? Yes. Okay, from, and to our colleagues around the table? It looks like we have agreement. Excellent. The last thing we need to pass, and I think there's been discussions amongst the parties, because we need to have the exact dates for when, to make sure it's a very accurate budget for when we go to liaison committee. So does October 9th to 15th still work for everybody? Can we? Okay, it looks like there's agreement around the table. Am I correct? Okay. With that, dear friends, thank you very much. Adjourned. Take care, all.